Okay, it's 4 o'clock on August 19th. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Public Works. And can we stand for the pledge?
Stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And a moment of silence, please. Thank you. All of our board members are here. The mayor's here as ex officio. Our general manager and our general counsel is here. Revisions or deletions to the agenda. Before I take that, I'd like to revise the agenda slightly and move item 14, the Sergeant Lundy report, to right after item 8. We can have Sergeant Lundy and let them go early. So, any revisions or deletions? Hearing none. Do I have a motion on the consent agenda? So moved. Second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, receive the Infomark wastewater treatment plant report.
Thank you. Okay, so items, one not on my report. The new SCADA computer at the wastewater plant's been installed and is online. So we tested it for a week, ran it in parallel with the old SCADA computers, which were two. There was one from Xenon and one for the rest of the plant. So they're combined into one now, hooked up, and everything's working well. The Headworks, the Equalization pump control panel, that project has been moving forward. We've had 2 project meetings with Josh, myself, Keystone, and Hills Industrial, who's going to do the install. So that's moving along. It's good. We did meet with Austin and GMB regarding the Headworks project. The discussion at that time was to actually do it as one project with one contractor, with the techs from Ovia rebuilding the bar screens, but a single contractor to complete the rest of the work. We also discussed replacement of the grit system, which because of the nature of that unit, the grit will wear down the metal, and that has a life of 15 to 20 years. So that's not recommended to be refurbished. That would be recommended to be replaced. We are still using the temporary dewatering container. It's working fairly well. We have to have it emptied about once a week, but we're capturing all the debris from the 2 millimeter screen. Now the 5 millimeter screen's all offline, and we are getting a buildup of material in the EQ tank, which is causing our pumps at the wastewater plant to become clogged more frequently. Now, this is very different from the clog at pump station 4, where the clog at pump station 4 is at the bottom of the suction pipe, and it's very difficult for us to access. The pumps at the wastewater plant, the EQ pumps, they're very easy to access. So we had one clogged today. It took my tech about 20 minutes to get it unclogged.
So when did you first notice the buildup?
The buildup, we started to have some clogging issues. Well, just one isolated issue beginning of last week, I believe, and where we had to switch pumps. Richard cleaned the pumps, and then Monday I had two mechanics down from Pennsylvania to service all the Gorman Rupp pumps, and all three pumps at the at the wastewater plant, all three equalization pumps did have debris in the impellers. So I did have a call with Austin this morning, looking to get some prices on getting the EQ tank cleaned out. Well, I think it's a buildup. So it was cleaned last summer, and from the time that we started, the 5mm screen has been ineffective. So from the pump stations, from pump station 4 and 8, it pumps through the 5mm screen into the EQ tank. So while the 2mm screen's working fairly well, the 5mm wasn't. We ordered bearings for it back in January. They just arrived beginning of this week. So it could be put back online, but we definitely need to get the EQ tank cleaned at some point.
So you believe this is just the annual cleaning, or is something changed?
If the 5mm screen was online, we wouldn't have to clean it in.
Okay, so the 5mm screen, it's passing.
Yeah, it would be, probably 5 years. But since it's not been effective, for I'm not sure how long, the cleaning last year, they cleaned it out. It was a $14,000 invoice I found.
So in the interim, while the 5mm is down, I assume is there alarmed on DP or something?
I'm sorry.
I assume is there alarmed on deep delta pressure, or?
They aren't. The pumps we can tell if they get clogged, but the flow slows down, and when you physically walk by it, you can hear it. So we have 3 pumps. They're all operational. So it's not the same situation as pump station 4, where we can't go down in a wet well and unclog that pump. So it's different, but it could be, it getting clogged so quickly this week could be because of the bypass pump isn't grinding up the ragging, that's been pumping to the pump station all week, except for today we put both pumps back online at pump station 4. So
it sounds like pump station 4 is harder to recognize problems because they're submersed. Is that accurate?
No, when you go there, you'll hear it if it's clogged. Yeah.
If you go over there, you hear.
Yes, correct.
How often do you guys routinely go?
We go there every day. We change the chart every day.
Okay.
In the morning.
But the pumps aren't submerged. The suction line.
The
is.
suction line's submerged. But you can hear it. It's knocking if it's not pumping correctly.
So because I live next door to it, I'd like to know what that sounds like. And I say this with all seriousness. I was going over there, 1 o'clock in the morning, listening and taking pictures and sending them to Austin.
It bumps. I don't know if you hear it from the outside, but from inside the building. When I walked in there last Friday, I heard it immediately.
If there's a way to hear it from the outside, I'd like to understand what it is, and
okay,
because I do live there.
Yep.
And I do worry.
Or would you like a microphone and a speaker in the house?
You know what? For the last couple of days, it seems like there is a microphone in the house. Just so you know.
The bypass pump is still there. It'll only come on if the other 2 pumps fail. It's still in automatic. There are floats there. So, and we do have alarms. So, we get an alarm if the level goes higher than it's supposed to. So there's a set point when pump 1 comes on, there's another set point when the lag pump comes on, and then there's a high level set point. So if the 2 pumps come on and don't make that high level set point, we get a call. So, and then
anything special found in the ragging that would be of interest, or?
Well, we blew it out. So, we couldn't get down. We didn't physically pull it out because it's down in a wet well. So, Boston asked me to try to retrieve some of these balls, and didn't get to it. It's very deep. I was hoping that we could get work with the BPW, get the back truck there, get the pump station cleaned again, and then we retrieve some of these bowls.
It's an excellent question. Both with the EQ pumps and these, any sampling that could be done, that could be analyzed to determine the source of the material would be
I did
helpful.
save the ball we pulled out of the EQ pump today, so.
It'd be interesting to see what those fibers are.
So we have that ball somewhere, I
I
said.
have it in a bucket, 5-gallon bucket. I think I took a picture of it, but I definitely have it.
Would you like us to bring it in here?
I have a very unusual aspect that actually I have not been able to smell for years. It's not COVID related, so I'm probably better off doing that than anybody, by the way. But I'm not necessarily volunteering for that.
That's what we pulled out. Oh, yeah. And that pump was cleaned on Monday.
When was this pulled out?
Today, this morning.
That was the pump that was cleaned on.
How big is it? Yeah, all 3 pumps.
That's unbelievable.
That's,
That tells you.
it filled up like half full of 5-gallon buckets. That's a lot of debris. So, yeah, we service all the bowls.
Now, there was report that the word is to.
I hadn't seen any of the syringes. I know Richard
Yeah.
saw one. I think Austin saw one. And you had asked me if pump station 3 is a grinder. When my guys went to service pump station 3, they could not get the discharge valve to shut, so they couldn't pull out the rotating, change the oil and the belts. But they couldn't. So they couldn't get the rotating assembly out. So I don't know if those are grinders or not. We'll try to keep trying to source that, but that's good. Will be on my next report, that pump. Pump station 3 on Pilot Town Road. That's, I was going to try to run out there today and see if there is a bypass, like we have the bypass at pump station 4, because it is in need of, those valves are going to need to be replaced.
Didn't happen that week.
Yeah.
This kind of stuff.
Did you switch out the United rental for the Godwin, or did you keep the United
We
rental?
had a United rental there. We have the Godwin still at the wastewater plant. I was going to see which one's cheaper, actually, and keep it. So,
At this point, if you have a better experience with Godwin,
yeah.
money.
Yeah.
I'd focus on better,
Yeah.
not cheaper,
Okay.
is what he said.
Richard had the connection with Godwin, and he's the one who called that in. I got the United rental. So
Yeah.
when he gets back on Monday,
What kind of backup capability do we have right now,
as far as
pumps and anything else that we need?
well, right now we have the rental box, the rental diesel pumps. We have 2 on site. We have the one at the pump station, and we have one at the plant. We were going to keep one. I think we discussed that we were going to keep one as a backup, indefinitely until the issue. With the vacuum.
What's the cost to keep 2? 'Cause Literally, we had 3 things go out, right, over a period of.
I mean, I think they're like $3,500 a month, so they're not cheap. Now, the county did end up bringing one to us, but I think they use it pretty frequently. They came and picked theirs up this morning.
What do the pumps cost?
I think a pump like that would cost at least 50,000-60,000.
County threw out a rough number. No, they have Thompson's, which is a Silent Night, which is just a quieter version. They said it was easily 6 figures, rough
Yeah.
estimate.
Theirs is big. I mean,
Yeah.
it's big. So
It is comparison wise.
bigger than we need.
And the backup that we have is suitable for all of our pump stations?
Well, it's
Because we have some small
it
pump
depends if there's
stations.
a bypass at each one, and I don't believe there's bypass piping at the smaller pump stations. So you could use it, but you'd have to run a hose all the way to the gravity. So when it has a bypass, there's a valve with a it's the pump station 4, it's a cam lock fitting. So that goes right into the force main. So there's a T outside of the pump station, right outside the pump station, and we can actually put those in the wet well and then pump back into the force main.
Do you have everything you need to do that if that occurs?
Correct, for pump station 4, yes.
Truck wise, we still use CDI because ours is a combination jet truck and a vac truck. We do about 800 gallons with it. Clean Delaware's is 4,200. It's comparison, but they don't jet. It's just a pump truck.
But I was trying to get out to pump station 3 this morning or today sometime to find out if there's a bypass there. You know, a lot of time the grass has grown over the valve box, so there's nothing obvious, but we do want to make sure there's a bypass there.
But what I've been thinking about is Friday night, there was a problem there, or thought there was a problem there.
Mhm.
Why wasn't that addressed Friday night or over the weekend? Why did that?
Yeah.
We're not getting your mic.
It's not turned on.
Was that why?
If you start talking, it should probably pick it up.
Pick up.
There.
No.
No.
It'll light up when it's red.
It's red.
Yeah.
Okay. So there was concern Friday night. Why?
Yeah, I mean,
Could you address it Friday night?
in hindsight, we should have. Richard was off at a funeral. I had called United Rental to bring the rental unit down. They didn't get down till like 5:30. You know, I was still at the plant, but I was there by myself. I called Richard. I told him if there's any issues, let me know, and I'll get some people down from Elton to help him set up.
You had Saturday. Did you think about correcting it Saturday?
You know, like I said, I was home. You know, we should have in hindsight. I mean, they did get the pump in, and you know, before any issues
Okay.
occurred, but that pump failed.
All right.
But yes, in hindsight, I definitely if we would have set it up. I would have stayed and set it up that night.
How far away are the resources from the plant? Or from the pump station, whatever you want to call it.
I'm sorry.
So how far are the resources that you can bring in, such as yourself and other people? How far?
We have like a 14-person staff in Elkton, Maryland. But you know, but that's the closest.
Next closest would be Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah, I have. You know, we have a bunch of projects in Pennsylvania, but
Lancaster?
towards the Philadelphia area.
Plus you have to mobilize.
I mean, I'm in Strasburg. I'm 2.5 hours away, 2 hours and 20 minutes away.
So when it comes to the distance, how are the capabilities? I mean, where do we go for different kinds of capabilities? Do we go to Lancaster? Do we go to Eastern Maryland? So when it comes to getting these kinds of things fixed, do we need people from different locations to come in together?
I mean, I have better maintenance people at different projects. So the guys I had down this week are 2 of my top maintenance guys. One was from Lancaster, one was from Bucks County, and they stayed down, you know, through today to work on the Gorman Rups. But we don't have that capability on staff. You know, these are bigger projects with a more developed maintenance crew.
So they repaired the pumps, is that what I understand?
No, they service them. The Gorman Rups, they're not submersible, so they service them. You put shim, or you remove shims as the wear plate wears. So you adjust them, change the oil, change the belts. I have guys that have been working on Gorman Rups. They're a common wastewater pump for years, and brought them down to service them. And I had that scheduled, you know, before this happened.
They become submerged, the pumps
The pumps at pump station 4 were submerged.
and the motors too?
Yeah, the motors, the one had a sealed motor, the other didn't, but the sealed motor, when we took the cover to the electric junction box, it leaked water out. So I called Hills. They said, I asked them if it would hurt anything to try to start pump 2, and he said it would fry the windings if it was wet, so it would be better to pull it, clean it, bake it, and and then we'd have that as a spare. So we ended up getting two new motors. They were $1,400 a piece. These are they are sealed motors, so they could be submerged.
So now we have two spares.
We'll have two spares once they clean and bake them. They're going to evaluate whether it's worth it. But
In other locations that your organization serves, are they having the same kind of challenges with ragging as well? Or are we unique to that situation?
well, I mean, they don't have the xenon membranes. So the xenon membranes are a big deal for the ragging, but that's, we have issues with ragging everywhere in collection systems. Some places have bar screens. Most pump stations have a common meter like they used to have at pump station 4 and pump station 8, but they went away from that and put in grinding Gorman-Rupp pumps. So the Gorman-Rupp pump has a plate that's a grinder. So common meters, if you didn't have a membrane plant, common meters wouldn't really be an issue. So, it's okay to have, some dragging, some debris at your treatment plant.
Have you seen the other plants, the other stations, an increase over time of ragging? I mean, because we hear about it all the time in the industry. And I was just wondering what your experience has been.
We did it, I'm over a plant in Bucks County in Bristol Township. And right when COVID started, they had a lot of sewer clogs. Increased, the Wawa had wipes there and people were discharging them, they had to go out and educate the businesses.
What is Infomark going to be doing a system analysis, a root cause report, recommendations?
Yes, yeah. With any kind of non-compliance discharge, we enter it. We have a reporting system, and there will be root cause analysis and action items.
And do you have a time frame on when that'll be complete?
Probably in a week from now.
All right, that'll be good for our use.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any communications with Dmacc recently or any new updates on anything from them?
We sent them the 5-day report on Tuesday, and I haven't heard anything from them.
Did Dmacc come down to assess the situation?
To my knowledge, they didn't come and interview us or see us. So, to my knowledge, they weren't on.
Did they come to your property at all, Mayor?
I was not notified. That's why I'm asking. I'd like to know if they did and when they did.
I remember seeing a vehicle, which was the silver and the black and green. They had turned down going down towards the canal. Nobody has seen it or talked to anyone that has been down there. But I know Rich had sent a video of the sheathing itself to Dmacc. So
I've seen that in the parking lot for the inn as well. A car. So, I assume they were down there. I walked down there.
I wasn't there at the time that they were there.
I walked down there. There wasn't anybody myself.
I have photographs of what's going on. I'd be happy to share.
Do you have anything else, Mike, overall?
I don't believe so. Any more questions?
We'll be very interested to see the report, of course.
Sure. Yep.
We've got a lot of bad press from this.
Yes, I understand.
Rightfully so. I'm not
understand.
criticizing the press corps.
Yeah.
But I think one possibly good thing about a couple of the reports did stress the waves. We tried to stress it when we talked to them, and that has come out of a couple of reports. So hopefully, maybe the message will help get out there.
I apologize. This happened. I mean, like I said, in hindsight, we should have that pump ready to go. But unfortunately, when the pump was installed, it failed. Had that not been the case.
So if this happened again tonight, because we're supposed to get rain at 2 a.m. tonight, if this happens tonight, are we prepared to have this not be an issue?
Yes.
100% confidence.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I got
You agree?
two guys that come here, locally, or I get, I mean, Richard would also be available, and we'll
Yeah,
get.
we've got the pumps, we've got the backups, we've got everything we need.
Four pumps. Four pumps. One is hooked up, two are active.
County
Suction line.
team's up there. Yeah, okay, yeah, you're right. Four pumps. Yeah, correct.
Well, let's hope it doesn't happen again, and we'll really look into it and make sure we're prepared the next time. Any other ideas about how we can get the rags out, maybe before it gets to the treatment plant? I don't know, a bar screen of some sort there, if there's any way of fitting one in, or
You could put a bar screen there. It's not the most pleasant thing to look at. I mean,
is there any way, is it big enough for a mechanical bar screen? Of any sort?
no, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, you can get all different sizes bar
Yeah.
screens. I mean, there's all kinds of.
Yeah.
It is something in my report, I didn't touch on it, but the generators, we had the generators at pump station 4 and 8 service. The generator at pump station 8 is fairly new, but the transfer switch is old and does not work. We can use it manually, though. We can manually go out there and close it, and it'll work. And then the generator at pump station 4 does not work. We have a rental from United Rental that Boston authorized me to get in. It's not hooked up yet because we have the diesel pumps out there, but BPW got the cable to get it hooked up.
So you've made all these recommendations to the board?
Austin.
Yeah.
Austin.
Charlie was in there with us.
Yeah. Okay.
When something like this occurs, should it occur again, is there a way to notify the county that you cannot accept any flow
Yeah.
from the county?
We immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
there's-
valve was shut.
At what
in.
point were they notified?
The county?
Yeah.
It was right away.
Right away.
There's a label right on the control panel at BS4 with the county number. So whomever's there will know who to call.
As I remember, our contract with the county is, it gives us sole discretion to terminate.
Cut it out. Yeah, shut it off.
Yeah, they're always very,
Yeah, in the summertime, so.
quick to sign. Yeah,
Anything else, Mike?
I do not.
Any further questions? Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
I received the president's report. I think, again, it was a shame of what happened and is an embarrassment to us, and not the way we should be serving the city, but all our ratepayers. But hopefully, this will help us get to the bottom of it and make sure that it never happens again. It's not a good thing for the environment and good thing for our ratepayers here in Lewes. So, but I have nothing else to report. Item 7, General Manager Report.
President Lee, members of the board. So just a couple highlights. Obviously, we had the incidents this weekend. I was in here pretty much every bit of the time that we had issues. I was in here at 1:30, went back home, got called back in, and was here again until about 12 o'clock the following morning. Like Press had mentioned, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we notify the public and get them involved with the ragging. I think I'm going to have our guys go down with the camera and start cameraing the sewer lines to see the correlation between a high rain event and these issues with the suction lines becoming clogged, where the debris is coming from, is it commercial, residential, so forth. On top of that, included in your packet was the EV charging station. Just an update. Darren actually had Dmacc transfer Green Energy Fund money to fund the EV charging stations. So we put $1,500 credit on each one. In your packet, you'll have a spreadsheet that shows to date what the BPW has put forth as far as monies for electricity, and now we have a rolling credit. I think it's $1,300 and about $50 on each one. I'll just continue to include this in the packet every month so you guys can see it. We also had a leak detection study done. They came in and did about 57, 58 miles worth of pipe. They came up with only 12 leaks, 10 of them being hydrants. 2 of them were fairly new, so we'll be able to pull the guts of it out and replace the guts. A couple of the other old ones are older, so we'll have to do a complete replacement of those. There was one valve that was in question, but it was very minor. They had a trace of some sort of what they deem as a sound of a leak, but it was also right where the canal bridge is, so they had vibrations coming from cars and so forth. There was no visible signs of water. And there was also one irrigation meter that was leaking. Our guys have a packet of this. They're going to start, chomping at the bit to get some of these done as time progresses. Attended the clean water, drinking water workshop and the WEAC meeting. A lot of it had to do with the ARPA funding and how that was going to be dispersed. The state received $926 million, but there's no real consensus on how that's going to be utilized. It's not been divvied out at all. So there's no update on there. We also had a meeting going over the final edition of the RKL handbook that is going to be presented at the next board meeting by RKL. That's pretty much the highlight. You guys have any other questions?
I guess the EV report is the installation was started in 2017?
Yes.
Right? So that's a 4-year time frame that
Yes.
references that money, right?
Mhm.
Thank you.
I'm beginning to get questions from residents regarding who's paying for the EV
That's one of the
station.
reasons this was done.
I know, but I think, we probably need to put out a newsletter or blast about how it's being reimbursed. I've had people say, I don't think my rate should, and I've tried to reassure them that you haven't adjusted your rates for a considerable period of time, but there's some information out there that it's being subsidized by homeowners.
I think, going forward, I think the board should decide whether they want to continue providing free energy as an incentive to
And I think it's
draw people to using EVs. So we may want to use that money, our money for that.
Well, we might, and I think this is a pertinent time to have this discussion because I think we're going to have to look as a city whether or not we want to put more EV stations in city lots. As we see the ramp up of more EV vehicles, we need to decide, should there be some in Canal Front Park? Should there be some in 1812 lot? And how can it be metered? And so I think this is a discussion that needs to happen between both the
We've
cities.
talked about that, and we're going to look at the literature, see what's happening.
Yeah.
Countrywide and locally. So we could certainly support you in that.
Terrific.
I was going to say Dmacc's a great source for that.
Yeah.
So.
That's great, Scott. But this is the undercurrent of what I'm hearing.
Sure, that's a good undercurrent.
Yeah.
I'm glad that it's being talked about at least. We should make a decision. Is that it? Austin, anything else?
That's most of the highlights.
Okay, with the presentations. Presentation by Scott Lynch of Dmacc on automated metering integration, AMIs. Scott?
Thank you for, okay.
Very good.
Get the permissions.
After Scott.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you all very much for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. Dmacc had presented previously on advanced metering infrastructure, AMI, or as more commonly termed, smart meters previously. The board had come back with 3 specific areas of questions, and that's what we'll be talking about this evening, what's presented before you. To begin with, the first slide is about Dmacc Overview. We are the wholesale provider of electricity. In addition to that, programmatic and regulatory activities. We are also a partner with American Municipal Power. They, like us, are a joint action agency, whereas we are a joint action agency of 8. They're a joint action agency of 135.
Could you adjust the lights so we can maybe have a better view?
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah, thank you.
So, as I was saying, DMACC as joint action agency, we represent 8, they represent 135. So as we bring economies of scales, they bring even larger economies of scales to services that DMACC is already taking advantage of. One of those programs that Lewes is already taking advantage, the BPW is taking advantage of, is the Efficiency Smart program. So understanding that that was something that's also brought by American Municipal Power, but managed by DMACC. So agenda tonight is focusing, as I mentioned, 3 areas. The AMI program, what's it going to do for you? And there's 3 areas that we were asked to ask for further details on. How is this going to enhance your utility operations? What is it going to mean as far as return on investment? And then what is it looking at for added customer value? So the areas enhance utility operations are some of the things we talked about before, but things that what I'm going to highlight tonight are areas that I have heard and that other members I've heard are issues in the future as we modernize our utilities towards meeting the demands of customers and a growing, just changing economy. First and foremost, to speak about advanced metering infrastructure, smart meters. This is the natural progression of utility. You have Delmarva Power and the cooperative have had their AMI systems in place 2009, 2010, respectively. You've had since that time the towns and cities of Seaford and Milford and Middletown have now the first 2 already have implementation. The Middletown is in its various stage of implementation, with the rest of our members in various stages of considering, and Newcastle being the next one that's really going to look at the vote as you are considering as well. So this is the next step, and that next step is really to handle some of the issues that we're talking about here. So the preparing for new technologies. EVs was a discussion just before me coming up, but understanding where are those systems? Where are those systems on your electric grid? This is something that could be done with the advanced metering infrastructure. You could look at an individual meter and see spikes of energy use, which could be correlated to someone using electricity in a higher demand way. More renewables coming onto your system, the impact of that, we see, I don't see solar slowing down anytime soon, but to give you a better understanding, one of the values of this resource is, when do you know that that solar resource is even there? See, with this system, it actually has an alert in place that can do backflow identification. So someone has installed a system, you don't know about it yet, you could get an alert to say, what's going on in this location? There could be solar there. So it's identifying greater usage of your system in such a way that could prove beneficial. Maintaining reliability and mitigating costs. This is a transition of utilities from reactionary, even though the reactionary is still, you can't get away from it, to more proactive approaches. You are getting calls in for an outage. You get calls in for service. You get calls in all the time to react to customer needs, and that's great. How about what are the advantage of maybe proactively knowing when those needs might be come forward? So, and mitigating costs before perhaps a transformer were to fail, you would know whether or not it is overloading or not, or underloading. Number 3 on the next slide is accurate rate structures. All utilities are looking at how you can better detail the rates that are appropriate for each customer class. Some utilities are looking at time of service. How do you get that data? The best way to get that data is to know when the electricity is being used, instead of just looking at the end of the month and saying, well, we used a lot of electricity at this place. Or this place or that place or the other. We looked at it at residential or commercial or industrial at the end of the month. It still tells you something, but it doesn't tell you as much what may be occurring between the hours of 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock at times when peak energy use during the summertime could be at its greatest. So having the information at hand can help you in your rate design. Next, increasing staff efficiency. With these meters, you're able to call upon the meters at one time to find out what the electric usage is at a particular location, at a particular feeder, at a particular transformer. These things can reduce staff time to have to actually go into the field, drive trucks, do the activities in the field. You could get this data in a more timely fashion. In addition to that, it's also looking at how better you can use your staff that's already in place. Again, this is not replacement. This is reallocating staff to other activities that may be, in your estimation, more valuable. And finally, customer demands and interest. Faster responses, instant access, government transparency, climate change, et cetera. Customers are looking for more and more how they can be in charge of their data, how they can know more about what they're doing. And this offers a 24/7 access. You enroll in the customer portal, you see what your energy use is at one time, gives you an idea, perhaps, you know, I didn't know I was using this much energy at this time of day. I didn't know I was using this much water at this time of day. Is there a leak? Do I have something on that I don't know about? Is there something else I could do with this? Can I take advantage now of the Efficiency Smart program? Because now I know there's a need. So these are ways that can help enhance utility operations. So that was the first question that was raised to us. The next slide gets into return on investment. I would say with this, we organize these benefits into organizational, which are more utility, and then social benefits, more to the person. So as I mentioned previously, meter reading, being able to enhance meter reading through faster collection, validation, automated systems. Field operations, reduce truck rolls. System losses, identifying where there could be losses in your system, i.e. leaks or energy use that you may not be aware of, and revenue and financing, how better for you to address your rate structure. Social benefits, looking at employees, safety and engagement, fewer chances of vehicles being on the road, so you're not having to have that truck roll all the time. Opportunities for staff to gain new development skills, customer experience I spoke about before, a culture change, more predictive versus reactionary operations, and improved capabilities, things you're going to learn from your system. This is going to be an information system. It is going to tell you more about your utility than you do know now. It's not as simple in return on investment that you invest this many dollars today, and then in 5 years, it's going to pay itself back. I can't do that calculation as accurately as possible because I don't know how well you value information, how well you value knowing more about your system than someone else. That's unique and specific to you. Moving beyond that, that was the one question about return on investment. Added customer value was the third question that was asked. And we focused this on what we have identified as basically a growing Amazon experience. You have folks who want to be able to go on Amazon 24 hours a day, get what they want, find out what they want, get the service that they want. This is one of those aspects of that. Again, not sponsored by Amazon, but it's an aspect of that. The customer would be able to go on to the customer portal if they so chose to enroll to find out more about themselves and maybe tips and tricks to do to help them with their energy usage. AMI, I spoke of many of these things before, but I would take you down to the fourth bullet, which I just thought was absolutely amazing. It's something I've never had an experience before. I've never been able to look at my electric bill and my electric company and tell me, hey, when does my bill reach $50? It's like an alarm clock for your wallet. When am I hitting $50? When am I hitting $100? People are not waiting until the end of the month to get that surprise bill at a time of the year. It's happened to me before. I would like to know, be able to put into my system, hey, when am I hitting these certain milestones? And that could prove valuable to someone to make both an energy efficient decision or a budgetary decision. One of the questions that, and I will skip to the footnote at the bottom here, one of the questions that was specific to Dmacc was to look at have the cities of Milford and Seaford conduct any customer satisfaction surveys about the system being in place. And when we went to them, we asked them and said, have you conducted such surveys? And they said, no, but we've seen little to no negative feedback. Folks are enjoying their system. It's in place. and they're not getting any negative feedback. Both communities, again, would have hosted others, and they'd be welcoming of hosting the BPW to come down and learn firsthand about their experiences with their utility. But given the fact that we haven't had a survey in place, we delved a little bit deeper. And I'll take you up to the middle part, which is related to the customer view of government in the role of energy and environmental issues. And the source of that is the Smart Energy Consumer Collaborative 2021 State of Consumer Report. And it's a report that you can read the rest of the bullets, but the highlight of it is customers are looking to get more engaged with smart energy systems. They're looking for the government to help make that a process that is easable and understandable for them. And that the last bullet, I think, is the most telling. 87% of respondents felt the government had a role in protecting the environment. This resource is it's a billing system, first and foremost. But secondary to that, it's an information system. And third to that, that information system could be an action system for a customer, a utility, to take some action on the behalf of themselves, or for a customer taking action on behalf of themselves, or for them individually. So with that, those are the three questions that we want to focus on. This project is eligible for participation with Dmacc's financing. So we had offered you originally some price options for what it would be to implement just a meter data management system, which is essentially a portal for information, a slow roll option to roll out only 25%, or a full rollout option. And with that, I want just to I don't think it came across clearly as last time. Dmacc does have financing options that are available for you to take advantage. So I think the full out price was something around 1.5 million. You wouldn't have to come up with the full 1.5 million in cash to pay for that at one time. Our members in Seaford and in Middletown are taking advantage of that, and Newcastle has also looked at that as well as an option for them to do financing. Financing is looking over 10 years, and then ultimately we would try to bulk this project with other projects to ultimately permanent finance on your behalf. So that is an option that is available to you.
And just to go along with that, I know when Eric Nuremberg was at Milford, he had spoke that one of the biggest issues when they did this project was the ability for the AMI system to talk with the billing system. So we actually took and digested that and said, okay, our old billing system frankly sucked. Our new system is what we went to, has the ability, is basically like the Lamborghini of being able to integrate. And I've already had conversations with them, and they know that this is something that we are looking at and that we can do through them. Again, if we were to pursue that, they would have to get involved, and they would be basically hand in hand with us. And
So would that be a cost savings? You're saying that's really not you can't show the rate of return.
so right, you can't.
It doesn't remove some of the manpower needed to process things.
So the only, when you're talking manpower on our side, it would be not having to roll a truck, a service order, anything like that.
Yeah.
That would all be taken care of because you would basically press a button and receive whatever the reading is at that point in time, both on the water and on the electric side.
And for disconnects.
And disconnects as well. The only thing is, and that's the only caveat, we have Suzanne, and I call it Suzanne because Suzanne really gets our customers, we really on disconnects, it's minimal. So we're efficient in that aspect. We do have a lot of transfers of service where we do final readings, and there, you could have a savings. I think Scott hit on it. If you're looking at it from an ROI, a simple ROI of money, you'll never win. It's kind of a broad scope.
Yeah, there's a lot of intangibles that go into it. And one of the things I would add is the proactive monitoring of the houses. Besides being able to detect outages when people are at home, it detects outages when we have a lot of second homes. And those people are not here. Or if you go away on vacation, this system would help to identify when a house is not using energy.
And to go along with that, I had a conversation today with Senator Stephanie Hansen, and we were talking about solar, and here in Lewes, we have about 1.1 megawatt installed, and I just approved 4 more going through. So it goes through spurts, but right now they're going like hotcakes. So being able to monitor that, again, you're throwing it in there, your category 2 chargers. But again, you're looking at, spending $1.5 million in cash right now probably doesn't make that much sense, because we have a lot of money that we have to put into the wastewater treatment plant and so forth. So you have the option through Dmacc.
When we talked about this, we've been talking about it for years. There were some meters that could be upgraded to add AMI to them. And we talked about buying that type of meter going forward, even though we weren't getting into the AMI right away. Have we done that?
From how I understand it, we have. Now, how it plays with their system, and I think this is really the starting point, because we would have to do a deep dive analysis into actually what we have in the ground that could be utilized versus what we're going to have to procure. Obviously, it does not make sense for our staff to start putting in meters and doing this whole project. We don't have the manpower for it, so we would just basically have a turnkey solution.
Now, the meters, there's a bunch of meters stored on Shea Avenue.
Yeah.
Pallets of meters.
Pallets.
Yeah. Are they that type of meter?
Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, you have like smart, smarter, and smartest. I think we bought the smart.
Okay.
Whether you want to have the smartest or not, am I not right, Scott? I think you can pretty much do any type of smart.
Smarter all the time.
Yeah.
How intelligent do you want your system?
Do you know anything about these meters and how they could be tied into what you're talking about?
I've not seen the meters. I don't know what they are. If we were to get some information from them, I could take them back to AMP and say,
I think that'd be
what's possible.
That'd be important. I think that if these are usable, then that would save us a lot of money if we've already got them.
It's a level of just infrastructure of that. Is there a way to take what comes out of the box, normally just put it in place, versus what do you need? What's the add-on you need to the existing meter to make it what you need it to be?
But we've got this, as we said, pallets in storage there, so we can use.
The other aspect of what you said about ROI is, well, if we just take our current billing system, our current rate structure, and transfer over. But this allows us the opportunity to go to time of day, peak, and that peak shaving gets you in two ways. I mean, it gets your congestion charge and your peak rates down, which is what we're looking for with the batteries also, which will impact both the customers and us.
And with RVs coming on.
And with RVs,
EVs.
I'm sorry, coming on.
I think RVs are here.
Yeah.
Easy RV.
They'll probably those before long.
That has the real dramatic case of everyone comes home at 4:30, plugs their EV in, right at the peak of congestion charges. And a smart meter can control and be a category 2 charging station so that it charges off peak at a discounted rate. So, I don't think that, on regular capital projects, looking at a straight ROI is one thing, but in something like this gives us flexibility to control our financing over the long term.
I was pushing back. I was the one that asked for the ROIs, the savings for us, the savings for our customers, and also the surveys. I thought it was 1.7 million was the upfront, was my initial belief.
It all depends on if you want all of the add-ons and like what the add-ons, we want are, and then you also have the equipment.
There's a monthly cost too, though, isn't there?
What there is that you have the ongoing costs, which are once the system is installed, you have your payment monthly, and then you have ongoing costs, which are sometimes once a year.
And was that like 47,000? I can't remember what it was.
It was
100,000 a year.
It was about, depending on what you chose to have,
Different levels.
those services could go up to 6 figures if you wanted them, I believe.
Yeah, I believe we had in the last presentation was depending, again, ultimately, this is based off of how many units you actually install, which drives the cost, how many of the modules, which is essentially the software packages, you go with it. What we presented previously was just under 1.4 million at $81,000 a year ongoing costs.
Was that base?
That was your base system.
So 80,000 annually base, and then if you chose.
81, I think you said. by the way.
Yeah.
Not
Just under 82.
not to put a fine point on it.
Just under 82, it's 81,851.
We'll go at 81.
Got one other question about, you say that neither Milford or Seaford have done any official customer satisfaction surveys. Do they have any information about how many people are actually taking advantage of the information that might be available to them? Because I question whether people are really taking the time to do this. I mean, it sounds like an interesting feature, but there are so many hours in the day.
My son would, I'm not sure I ever would.
Well, and if you've got 3 little children running around and you're a 2-parent household and you both work, when are you going to have time to do this?
Sure.
And
I can speak to one part of that. The city of Milford, I do not have an answer to. The answer I have on the city of Seaford is they originally rolled out their customer portal simply to council and asked them to engage with it so that they could then engage with the public as they began to market it. And I think it's only recently they began to open it up to the public. So there's no customers, there's no information. No information.
That's what
That's the best I can.
I mean, it's a good sales technique, but there's really nothing to back it up, saying that people are actually accessing it. Yeah.
No, that's customer choice.
Yeah.
If they choose to do it, if you put the portal in place.
There must be national, APPA probably has that kind of stuff, don't they? I would assume.
You would be surprised. We actually went and began looking at some of these questions, and we had to look at in places that we weren't expecting to look to get the data that we did get.
That's disappointing. I mean, they cover most of this and they're pushing EVs.
And to be understand, and I'll tell you this, I'm in Dmacc Power and I have friends in the cooperative. I go on it. I see it at my home. I see it for the usage that
Yeah.
I mean, I like this stuff, so it's valuable to me. But yes.
I was gonna say, through your conversation with Seaford, Milford, Middletown, did they make this decision from a customer base, or did they make it from a customer's perspective, or did they make it for a utility perspective?
Oh, this was mostly a utility perspective. The value was to that, and then they looked at it as the customer portal as something we're going to offer it to the customer, and the customer may elect to use it to its full advantage. They may elect to use it to pay the bill.
So at the last APPA conference, I went to a section on AMI. They had put out that nearly 60% of the utilities, that's not public utilities, that's utilities across the board, have installed or are converting to AMI.
And we still have no cost justification from all those.
Well, in a lot of cases, I mean, and as they put out, some of it is mandated. California, you have no choice.
Right.
So public service electric and gas, Southern California, they have to. And there are other places from a regulatory perspective, because from a climate change, energy conservation usage, it's being driven. Other places, it's proactive from reducing capital costs down the line by understanding where your hotspots are in your grid. So this, while it may not be customer facing, it is customer focused because it's making the utility more capital efficient, which affects rates, especially if you're a public utility.
It would be interesting to have it run this through and see how it would affect our rates. I mean, that's what the customer's going to be interested in.
That data doesn't exist, I don't think, does it?
Well,
I mean, I think you could work the numbers.
right, I mean, it would mean using our rate studies to propose different rate structures and see how it impacted it.
The average age of people in Lewes.
67.
67, so went up, so okay with the new one.
I think it's 16.
67 is an older population. I'll speak for myself as well.
Young to me.
Well, it's an older population than there is nationally. So I would assume there's a diminished desire to want to use these kind of tools from a technology standpoint. I know my father wouldn't, I know I wouldn't, but it doesn't mean others won't. But it is a factor as we look at what's best for our constituents.
It is an information source for them, but you have a very spry young utility, not very old, and you want to keep it modern. And that's where a lot of your information is going to be as your population changes dynamics and changes. What it is today could be different in the future, but what's going to stay the same is your utility that has to plan for the young, the medium, and the old.
Right.
And you maintaining that somewhat is different than the other side of it, which is, as you said, a population that may not use it.
I'm not putting down your back top at all. Our trade-off though ends up being things like rusty pipes, right? Because we are old from that perspective. So these are the kind of trade-offs that we need. Is there a technological advantage, or is there a base need for different things?
I would say that, I agree with you that not everyone's going to use these tools. But selling this by, what are we paying now? 38% of our electric costs are congestion charges? As a means of reducing congestion charges to reduce rates or to maintain rates?
The peak rate you're talking about?
Yeah. I mean, that directly. Well, people may not be interested in setting, my bill at $50. They want to see their electric bill, the total cost.
But if we had batteries to look at peak, to take off that peak, if we had a solar field, we know when those peaks are.
Solar does not help your peak.
Okay, but you have the ability to store it with electric batteries if you wanted to. So my point is, there's a lot of things we can do to reduce our cost that are dollar for dollar. There are a lot more line of sight to it.
I would disagree, but that's.
Well, that's you and I disagree a lot, and we always get smarter because of it. The data that I looked at said that in 2035, 25% of all, and this was in the New York Times, of all car sales will be electric in 2035. But still, even when that happens, 13% of the cars only will be electric, because cars last so much longer, 10 to 20 years. And even in 2050, 60% of all new car sales will be electric, but still the majority of cars will be gas.
Right.
And again, it is coming, and it's coming faster probably than I would say that this even says. But
there's a push, an environmental push to get rid of the gas guzzlers.
This is assuming that the plan that all the manufacturers seem to have now to stop going gas
There's been a
production.
proposal, I forget which legislator it was buying the cars back. And those types of things that would push that way out.
And I agree with you on average, those are the numbers typically that I've seen. However, if you read the data behind it, it's also very much geographically dependent. So some states are going to be at 5% EVs, and other places are going to be at 70% EVs.
Whereas Delaware and Lewis, I have no idea.
We're a wealthy, educated, transient population. I would bet you we're on the upper side of it.
Your upper side of people that want to look at their meter every other minute?
No, that are going to be buying EVs.
I don't think so. I would like to know how many EVs we have in Lewis. I won't probably ever get one until I'm forced to. I don't fill up my car. I fill up my car less than once a month. Okay. So a lot of people that live in Lewis are just like me. They could, they don't want to go plugging their car in. Now, wait a minute, I'm not finished.
Okay,
They don't necessarily need to go plug in their car. They don't want to go look at meters because they don't have to. They don't have to worry about their electric bill. We have very good, our electric bills are very low. And so I'm very concerned about the cost because we need to put the money in the ground. We just had a major notification that we need to get moving on that. And my concern is also, my understanding is we have a meter reader. Now Lewes is small, but it takes him 5 days or her 5 days to read every meter in Lewes. And the truck travels around, doesn't have to go 50 miles to read anything.
And it's an EV vehicle.
Now, if we're looking at between $80,000 and $100,000 a year just to the ongoing cost, we can't even come close to it with our costs. So now we're talking about putting smart meters in and the whole system in at $1.5 or $7 million. At this point in time, I'm not worried about the EVs and I'm not worried about solar, people putting solar on their house, and I'm not worried about any of that because I'm much more worried about, we have an old town with old infrastructure. And to spend, I think we probably would get replaced if we spent $1.7 million on this system. And people said, well, wait a minute, why are you doing that? I don't think the majority of people in Lewes could care less about it.
so 2 points.
Maybe the other point that I think does have merit, which is about the transformers and the loads.
Well, so to realize that, we have a system. What is that? There's an average of 4 houses per transformer, right?
Yep, right.
Per
around.
transformer. If you have adjacent houses buying EVs, you're going to overload the pole transformers. And we have no proactive notification. And even though we have the Sergeant Lundy report that was based upon forecasts, the forecasts for load growth were conservative with what we're seeing with EV growth. So we could have problems in
That's a good
feeder
point.
lines.
That's a good point. I'm
So-
not worried about it myself personally at the moment.
So, but to your point, is the person who's driving on Sunday back and forth to church is not consuming the gas, they're not damaging the environment. And the justification for converting to an EV is probably not there. However, if you drive 12, 15,000 miles a year, the studies show that by 2030 or 2035, an EV is going to be cheaper to own.
It probably will be, and I'm sure it will be.
And the majority of people in this town drive more than 12 to 15,000 miles a year. So, I mean, I think we're bucking the trend. And we're tying our hands with rates. And we're not going to be aware of our infrastructure degradation.
If somebody gets, and I don't know the answer to this question, if somebody gets an EV station, charging station at their house, is there a permit involved from the city? Is there a notification to us in any way that it's happened? I don't know what happens when that happens.
So it would come through you.
It depends. If they have to upgrade their service,
Let there be light.
then they have to pull an electrical permit.
So they don't have to tell us they're getting an EV.
Right,
No.
but no, but
They're
you
getting another
go
client.
from a 100 amp service to a 200 amp service, you have the chance to be able to detect it at that point.
So does
I have a
some of that
400 amp
negate
service in
the
my house.
transformer?
It would not be.
I think you'd have to monitor the upgrading of electric services, And that would come through your permitting process, not the city's.
I mean,
Understood, okay.
talking about EVs, I think we have relatively many EVs compared to the average community. I would say are, I don't know this, but I see a lot of them and I know a lot of people that have them in town.
So off of Earl's comment, in May, from May of 2020, which is a rough number because of the pandemic, we had 397 kilowatt hours used at Otis Smith. May of this year, we had 1,107.
It's triple almost. Yeah.
And then it basically doubled in June in comparison. And then if you go to Schley Avenue, same one, it was 817 in May of 2020. In May of this year, it was 1486.
And to that point, I'm sorry to go ahead. You know, from the prosperity of Lewes being a tourist town, if we don't address EVs, it's going to impact tourism.
The last time we had this conversation, I had gone online to all the VRBOs, all the rental places. And I tried to search for EV charging stations in the rental houses. It wasn't even a category that I could search on there. Now, maybe it is now. But if that was an advantage to someone renting a house, you'd see it.
But that's 2021. It's going to be in 2025.
And by the way, I'm talking about the last time we had the presentation. So it's months ago from today.
And from that point, generally what we're talking about is your standard house service for your standard EV that's on the market right now the standard market is a level 2 charger. It's one step up from plugging it into the electrical outlet. Most homes have an electrical outlet on the outside. The difference between a level 1 and level 2 is we're charging it 8 hours at level 1. We're charging 8 to 12 hours, depending on the depth. We're charging at 4 hours at level 2. So you might not have that initially as a selling point to say, well, you can charge your house in 4 hours at my particular location. But most of us have an electrical outlet on the outside. And most of us have, EVs are going to come with some sort of adapter that if it isn't important for someone to travel to a beach town, to travel anywhere, they can reach to that adapter and plug in. So to your point, it might not exist yet, but the market may have already made a mechanism to make it so it works.
Yeah, and just to amplify for everyone's, a level 1 charger is 110 volt. A level 2 charger is a 220 volt. So it's equivalent to a dryer. Matter of fact, I think they are 30 amps, if I remember correctly.
It's about a dryer.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that there's cool things coming out. I mean, when you get the ability, if your house goes out and loses power, that the battery of your car can now generate 2 days worth of power for your house. I mean, there are wicked cool things coming. But I think the speed of being able to charge, we're buying a new car and we're not buying a hybrid car. And I'm a huge fan of the environment, but this is a car that we travel with. And I don't want to go and sit behind somebody for 40 minutes or whatever while they charge, and then I've got to charge for 40 minutes. So we made that trade-off personally for us. It doesn't necessarily change any of this. It just means that things are going to be better. When there are better charging capabilities, does that mean, and I don't know these answers, does that mean that you could put more juice in faster? Or
Yes.
So it would be a higher charge,
Right. And that's
discharged quickly, but would be a lot more pull on the transformers.
Well, I mean, you take the EV buses that are coming out. I mean, they charge in 30 or 40 minutes, I think is.
Yeah, but
they're massive, I mean, in their induction. But you're charging a massive amount. And that's not, you're not going to charge a bus at your house. And you don't want to be. But we're going to be buying an EV. We have a hybrid, and we'll use that for long distances, and an EV for the local. And
I think that will be fairly common.
My next car is going to be an EV. I know that. I've been looking forward to it. What do we, we've been talking a lot and we've got a lot on our agenda.
Yeah.
What do we want to decide today? What are we looking to happen at this?
Can I ask one other question?
Yes, sir.
What's the timing of implementation of the different levels of AMI installations that you mentioned?
So we had 3 levels, which was a essentially a software package, a slow rollout, which is 25%, and then another rollout, which was 100%. The meter data management system would go much, much faster because that's just an interaction between American Municipal Power and the IT department here at the BPW, and how quickly that interaction could occur. That would be much, much faster than the 25% or the 100%, which involves actually procuring meters, which right now has a 16 to 20 week turnaround once an order is placed to get meters. Don't exactly hold me to that. We are living in a world of COVID where things get a little squirrely, but that's where we stand right now. We've heard from the manufacturer as of yesterday.
And that first level is how much time?
The first level would be probably in the order of maybe a quarter, 3 months, depending on how quickly everyone was to work together.
Okay.
The rest of it is, as I said, you started out initially with 16 to 20 weeks to procure the meters, and then when they're in place, ideally, if you are doing a meter replacement, you would be doing the software package integration while you're waiting for the meter, so you can do things in tandem. And then from that point, 16, 20 weeks later, you're based off of your schedule. We're doing Middletown right now. Pardon me for saying, I'm just thinking, we're doing Middletown right now, which is about, I believe it's about 8,000 meters, and we're doing that in about 6 months.
Total rollout time?
Total rollout time. But
What was Seaford and Milford's?
Seaford and Milford was, I was in charge of the program at that time, so I don't have an answer.
They staggered because didn't they focus on electric and then go to water?
Right, and that's why Middletown is so much faster. They initially focused on electric because a lot of their water meters were inside residents, and they didn't want to disturb that right now. They did do a certain number of water meters in new developments so that the system would be in place. It could be tested. They did about 250. So that's why they're at that speed. Some of the others were a little bit, well, I would say longer because they were doing both water and electric in tandem. You generally want to do electric first, because what happens is the water meter talks to the electric meter, and then that's how everything integrates. So you have to get the electric in first.
So if you started with the first package of the software, is that sufficient to then add, graduate, and add on all the way to best in class?
Sure, you could start out with a meter data management system. It would offer you some level of smart meter. This is when you're starting out. Remember, you may mention smart, smarter, smartest. You're starting out, you're becoming a little bit more intelligent with the meter data management system, but you're still at the whim of however well you can procure data to go into it. That system, that software package will allow you to do some level of analytics. You'll be able to do some analysis that you might not have been able to do before, but you're still at the ability of your current infrastructure to feed it data. If you're still only feeding it data once a month, you're still limited. As you would then roll out 25% of meters, you would be able to have better in class information for that 25%. You would then run a partial, the other 75, off your existing system still. So you're smarter. And then as you progress towards a full rollout, you get to learn more and more of your system in different areas.
Yeah, it'd be good to know if we're going to do this or not, because we got a lot of growth coming on pretty quickly over the next several years.
Yeah.
So if we're going to do it, now would probably be a good time to get the right meters.
Correct. Can I suggest maybe a way to think about it now, if this is right or not, because I'm not smart as some of this stuff is. I think I'm not that smart. If we were to look at projects individually, we would approve every project, because individually they look very good. Right. The reality is we need to compare this project, which is very good and very valuable and very needed in many ways, against other projects that we have. So it's almost, we need to look in total across the board and make the prioritization, because I would approve everything that came up, because there's value in it and it's important. We only have a certain amount of money. So putting things together in a pot and figuring out that way, I think is a way to look at it.
So a question though, if DMACC's gonna finance it, we're not exactly taking $1.5 million out of the capital budget from pipes in the ground. What would the cost be per year?
It would depend on what package you were looking at. If you were looking at just the software package, it would be much, much less than
No,
financing $300,000 is much less than 1.5 million.
Right, but
The whole thing, I mean, so you're gonna have an ongoing O&M cost of probably about $100,000. Just throw a number out there of 100. If you're doing it over 10 years, I'm assuming probably what, 2 or 3% interest once it's finally done. I don't know what.
Interest rates right now, this is one of the questions that does come up. Why do it now? Why do it now? And it's a gre's question. I always had that for the longest time. Why should I buy a computer now? Isn't it? And you're going to be obsolete. Isn't the next thing going to be better? And that's a good approach to think. When we think now, it's because we have seen consolidation in the market. As far as media manufacturers. So their ability, Itron specifically is the vendor that's here, has consolidated a lot of other vendors under its portfolio. It's doing things less expensive, bringing out a better product. So there's that. We have American Municipal Power has done a survey of all the vendors that are out there and have chosen the technologies that they did based off of a search. So we have that search. The next part is the price of money is relatively low right now. And in the future, I don't know what that's going to be. So if we're looking for a bottom on the price of money, smarter men than me have tried to predict that, but it looks pretty good right now.
there's not too much further down to go right now. And so it's not.
The bank starts paying you to do the project, negative interest.
Well, that's what question.
California was paying people to take their electricity, so, stranger things have happened. So we're not talking about taking $1.5 million out of other projects. I mean, I think that's one.
We're talking about taking on debt.
Right,
You're also talking about the annual maintenance fee.
right.
Talking about annual maintenance fee.
Yeah. I'd rather finance this than something in the roads, obviously because of prevailing wage. So this is the kind of thing to finance, but still debt is debt.
You got a question from the public.
Sorry.
That's it, one time.
Press, you do have a member of the public at the appropriate time would like to make a comment.
Scott, is there a phone up there? There is.
There is.
Yeah. I'm gonna email him now, Sharon.
Oh, can we let the public speak?
I'm done.
All right,
Robert is on.
okay.
Good evening. This is Robert Kennedy. I live at 123 Henlopen Shore Circle in Lewes. It seems to me that the question for the board is AMI needed now, and is it a priority, especially when the BPW has an unprecedented need for higher priority capital expenditures? And an exhibit earlier on the agenda is now it's $42 million plus over the next 5 years. And as it's been already discussed or alluded to, a recent study of our electric system by Sargent and Lundy, I believe, concluded that we had a sound system with sufficient capacity, even if we had 50% electrical vehicle penetration for at least the next 10 years. So our electric system seems to me serves a relatively compact service area, and because of its size has been able to be monitored on an ongoing basis by our current electric department personnel, supplemented by annual technical evaluations performed by consulting engineers on transmission, I'm drawing a blank, transformers, that's the other T word. So we do have a feel for how those transformers are being used. And so while that doesn't provide real-time data, it's a system that's met our needs and the customer needs without having to incur investment in metering, currently estimated, as we've heard, between $1.5 million to $2 million. Even if it were financed, that's still taking on debt and incurring costs which have to be serviced by taking dollars that could be spent on other projects. So unless the BPW intends to institute voluntary or involuntary load control, I don't see a compelling reason to install AMI now. And some of these load shifting tariffs institute a complexity that I think a lot of our customers would find challenging and difficult. Time of use suggests having to change behaviors in order to effectuate cost savings. That raises a whole different level of change behaviors, which again, in order to benefit from, you have to ascribe to. So I'd recommend that the priority be given to the battery project, and implementation of AMI be tabled and reviewed periodically over the next 10 years when AMI technology will continue to evolve, and hopefully the cost to acquire and install would decline. That basically concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
So two comments. Robert, thank you very much. The Sergeant Lundy study was excellent, but it was not nodal. When its conclusion said that there was capacity, it was the substation and the main feeders. It does not address 4 people on a block or 2 people on a block getting an EV, because they had no way of, I mean, there's an infinite number of combinations. So there's that aspect of it.
But if they, I'm just trying to understand, but if they do get those charging stations, if 3 out of 4, or whatever it is, 4 out of 4 get them, we will have notice of that in advance.
If we change things potentially, or
But we do have notifications when they, and I assume that's the case, when they put in an EV station.
If they're not changing in the internals, if they're not upgrading a service from like a 200 to a 300 or a 400.
So it would be stage 1 versus stage 2.
No, stage 1 to stage 2 is probably fed off of a 200 amp service.
yeah, I mean, if you have a 200 amp service in your house, you do not need to upgrade your service to put a category 2 in.
And when you go beyond that and you begin putting in, for example, the Tesla model system right now, where to your point, you want something that's going to recharge very, very fast, something in the order of 10, 15 minutes, you're looking at 400 amp service. And that's significant. And my understanding is that those systems are already being planned for how can we have those incorporated in new homes.
So if we put in a charging station that is a 1 or a 2, then we don't change out anything, so there's no notification to us.
Potentially, because if the house only has 100 amp service,
Then it would go.
then they would probably have to upgrade. But, most houses, I mean, anyone who's got heat pumps or geothermal has probably got a 200 amp service.
Well, again, this has been going on.
Yeah.
And we've got a lot of information. What is the, what were you looking for basically today from us? To move forward with this, or to further study it, or drop it? What?
It's one of those that we've talked about it for several months, and it's a whether we want to pursue it, whether you want to go visit one of Milford or Seaford to see it in action. It's kind of at the will of the board. I know we got a lot of projects going on, but so in terms of a payment and principal and interest on a yearly basis off a $1.5 million loan at 3% interest, about $176,000.
Plus 81.
Yeah. And that's 81 if you do base.
I'd be willing to go to Milford if anybody else wanted to.
Yeah, I'd like to see it and understand it. But I still would like to see what that would mean to our rates. I mean, you have a number, and I would think that we could plow that through into the number of users and so forth, and come up with an idea of what the impact would be in the electric rates. We have pretty low electric rates, the lowest electric rates. So I'm not, we shouldn't be bumping it up to an unreasonable level. So I'd like to see what that is.
Well, I'm wondering if we shouldn't go back to UFS and ask them what rate structures they have used or would recommend if you had an AMI system.
Would it also be prudent to have an assessment done of the meters you have sitting on pallets as to whether they are adaptable?
Yeah, that would be.
I mean, before you make any decision, wouldn't you like to know whether those are serviceable or not?
Yeah, if you look, yeah, I think we should do that.
So all three.
I'm concerned they're not. That's my concern.
Well, you're talking technology. I mean, some of those meters, as you buy, I mean, we bought knowing that the pandemic was coming, knowing we couldn't get meters. So there's some of those down there were left over from Milford. So Milford did their change out. They had some meters left over.
Well, if they sold them to us and they upgraded to DMI, then
Well,
they're probably not.
They're probably not used.
Bob's gonna find that box because Bob.
The
likes
city
to
learned that when we
gracious.
bought used police cars from another municipality a few years ago. So
That's got rid of.
buying used equipment is.
Yeah. Well, these are used, as far as I know.
No, some of them were not used.
Were some of them used?
Some of them were, but it's priority. I mean, if there's one in a new box, we do it. Bob is very gracious. He helped out the city of Milford and said, we have space and if we can implement them, we can. Again, the only thing that you run into is that, so if you change out from a maintenance standpoint, if you're using meters that were purchased a year ago and you're moving forward, the only benefit you get by doing it all at one time is it's all one piece of equipment. They're all the exact same meters.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
where we have, if we move forward and you do, there's a little bit of these and a little bit of that and a little bit of these, and then you have,
Yeah.
it's the only thing.
And that's why, if we have all this new stuff coming into town and we're thinking about it, we should, now would be the time to do that.
And I know it's been a long meeting, and so the rate study that we had done, and we need to, at some point, talk through that rate study, suggested that we needed to increase rates or go out and get a loan for $6 million, just based on what we currently have in the system. That's a lot of debt to take on, in my personal opinion. So I think understanding all the programs together and prioritizing the top ones. I don't know how this would compare to batteries. I don't know how this would compare to a solar field, but those are the kind of trade-offs we need, because I don't technically want to go out and borrow $6 million and take on that much debt. So I think we've got to look at this in total.
Well, I think that's an excellent point, because the battery project is a hell of a lot more expensive. And maybe this addresses the congestion charge and other issues, and we postpone the battery. I mean,
We got to do trade-offs. I mean, and that's what I
Get a consensus at this point, or is it worthwhile, or do we want to put it off for another workshop, or where are we here? I'm not interested in voting for AMI at this time at all.
Okay, I am, Tom,
So,
but
I think we need to compare.
Yeah,
So
I
I think there needs to be an answer, but it needs to be a broader conversation.
if we prioritize the projects, that would be fine. I mean, AMI would be great for us, and we could do a lot of things with it. There's no question about it, but I'm very concerned about what we've got in terms of what we need to put in the ground, so to speak. And I'm not willing to either spend the money or borrow the money at the moment. Until we do, as Earl said, do some serious prioritizing, because we might find that we put ourselves in the bucket.
so my suggestion is the next presentation is going to be the battery project.
yes,
I would suggest we go out, if we determine we're going to go out for bid on the batteries, we submit that and we get some hard numbers in, and that will allow us to better compare the two.
Fine. I need a lot more information before I'm willing to vote to spend any money on AMI at this point.
Can I sell you a small nuclear reactor?
Pardon me?
Can I sell you a small nuclear reactor?
That would be great. I'm not against nuclear reactors, actually.
It was a great presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. If I can offer one thing, and to your question, comparison amongst other things, I think that's a great idea. This tool could be the very tool that helps you do the comparison about, is the battery, how well is the battery doing? How well is the solar doing? How well is the impact? You could look at this as, this is the measuring kit, so you can then choose what else you want to do. And I'll just leave it with that.
That makes sense, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
well, can we ask you, Earl?
Yeah.
As the treasurer and your committee, if you can get it set up?
I can.
6 months, by 6 months out, we'll have this and the battery information.
Sure.
And we can do that comparison, see where we stand, see what the impact would be and what the benefits are.
Now, when you're talking about the impact on their rates, are you taking the overall cost of this project and distributing amongst like each ratepayer and that impact? Or are you actually looking at what the impact is if we change to time of use rates?
I was looking at, what this would cost the average user. If I was the user, I would want to see, is this going to raise my rates 10%, 15%? Understand that and get their input at that point.
I would say it's both. Because I would say that this gives us the flexibility to look at our rate structure and look at alternatives and its impact on the customers. And that's why I think we should go back to UFS and see what they say that they've seen for rate structures to address congestion charges with AMI.
That's a good idea.
So start there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to take the lead on this?
You want to work it together?
Sure.
Okay. Very good.
One of the things you might want to look at is with all this growth, would an AMI, it makes sense to put AMI meters in the new growth areas first, as, how would that impact your system? If you're looking at about a 10% growth, that would give you a pretty good.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You got a big group coming in a short period of time.
Yeah.
And if we're leaning that way, we better make a decision and move forward with it.
It's true. I mean, there's a lot of new construction that's going to be going on.
Is that suitable for everybody?
Yeah.
Can we do that? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think we don't need a vote on something like that. So, okay. Thank you very much, Scott. for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
All right, we're moving to item 14 now. Open forum general discussion of RFP for the battery energy storage solution. Sergeant Lundy, Austin, Tom Panetta, Scott Lynch, all of you. Where is?
And I think you're gonna have, is Udit on and Jeremy?
Yes.
Yes.
Presentation by Scott.
No, there's Scott. Scott helped with it.
Austin, you sent us all the information on the RFP.
Light reading.
I didn't go through it all yet, and I don't think I will for a while. But so we're going to be talking about a very high level here, rather than the details of the.
I would very much like to give you an overview of that document, so you don't have to peruse 88 pages.
Thank you very much. Your name?
I'm Jordan Murray. I work for Sergeant Lundy, and I'm here to maybe guide everyone through that presentation or that document with the presentation. And I have, we've been working with Austin and Scott and the guys on the phone, and Darren when he was here, about how we would go about implementing this battery into the city of Lewes, and then I guess to tag along with the last presentation, that is about a minimal investment from Lewes BPW as possible for this project. So let me bring up. Tom, we actually work with NuScale, the small nuclear reactors, so we could probably help you out. Your nuclear reactor patients.
I've been in with GE, so.
Oh, right.
I get an employee discount.
Wow. On a nuclear reactor?
Sure.
All fun and games until tomorrow's newspapers.
That was a joke.
Do you think wind is a challenge?
I'm giving the permit to put one of those in, by the way.
See, we'll know that.
The permitting might eat up your savings right there, just the cost of permitting.
Only if you think you're going to be caught.
you want to use my book? Would that help you? If-
Go off the website, Josh.
Sure.
That help you?
I mean, I have my slides. I know what's on them. I guess if you just want to start from the first one, then, so, I guess I should introduce myself again.
We
Jordan.
need to get the light. Oops, sorry.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So we were the ones who did the study recently. Glad everyone's got a chance to look at that. So I guess we're going to start with this overview of this document you've got in front of you, request proposal. And then we're going to give you a nice background on battery energy storage systems in general. I was hoping to focus a little bit on the details on the site that you guys have picked out, which is a great site. And then go through the kind of the quick overview of that document that you've got in front of you. So battery energy storage systems would be a chemical way to store bulk electric energy on your system and then discharge it at a time that's more useful to you. So they're becoming much more popular recently. There's a lot of great uses for them. So for example, there'd be obviously the main one that we've been talking about is kind of demand load shedding, and then peak shifting would be the other way. Kind of lump those in so you'd be able to charge it at a time that was useful and cheap for you, and then discharge it during peak load situation and help you out with a lot of these problems that you seem to be having with the congestion charges. There's also a lot of other ancillary services that you can get from them to help you with frequency regulation, voltage regulation, a lot of just like housekeeping things that any utility would do on its own. These inverters that come with the batteries are great ways to use that as well. And then obviously everyone knows about incorporating renewables as well, which would be much more useful. The peak solar is around lunchtime, which is not when you want to use that energy. So the ability to store it and then use it during peak demand is pretty much pretty vital. I think 2 more slides. So additional capacity, you don't have to bring on spinning reserves, and then energy arbitrage is the folks, the private sector who install these batteries, and then they have their own sort of algorithm, and they play the energy markets like a stock market. So they just buy low, sell high kind of situation there. If we go to the next slide.
That's the way it's supposed to work. It doesn't always work that way. Sorry.
No. So when we talk about BESS, this is kind of what we're talking about. You start with your batteries, inverters, patent out. There's some auxiliary equipment involved, but these are the big major components. So if you start with the battery, either containerized or rack fed, so you can install them and store them inside a building, or a containerized unit would be able to sit outside. It's weatherproofed. They all come with their own fire protection systems. They all come with their own heating and cooling. And then there's 2 major battery chemistries. There's called NMC, nickel, manganese, cobalt, and then iron phosphate are the 2 kind of competing chemistries on the market today. NMC is a higher density battery. You can actually store more megawatts per square foot that way. They are more expensive, and they are the additional density more difficult to kind of regulate and control. So the LFP usually comes out to be a little cheaper in the long run. But then you move over to your inverters, which is where you're going to switch DC to AC. You've got these are a lot of manufacturers, but they also, modern inverters allow you to do a lot for your grid, not just convert DC to AC. They allow you to control what frequency you're going to put it on, what voltage you're going to put it on, which is where you get all these ancillary benefits to your system. It's a great control point, which otherwise you might need an additional piece of equipment that would not be, which would be an additional cost to you. And then the last thing you're going to do is you're going to move it over your pad mount transformer, which will step up the voltage to wherever you're going to interconnect to your system. These are pretty standardized, we see these everywhere. But then from there, you land your cable on a point of interconnection, which from a lot of projects is kind of where the tricky part is, just because being able to locate the battery near where you'd interconnect is a lot of the effort in design engineering we go to, which is actually very good for this site because the site you've chosen is right across the street from the intended point of interconnection. So if you go to the next slide. This is, you're not meant to read the tiny text by any means, but this is just something we had put together during the process of our RFP generation. This is what it might look like. We're going to put it out to bid, and all these battery vendors will come back with their own solutions. But in this particular situation, you've got the batteries stored inside the building, kind of cables running outside to the inverters. These transformers, which you can actually see in that satellite photo, are already property of Lewes BPW, which is an additional benefit for this type of project.
I'm trying to understand exactly where that is. Is that where the parking lot is today, or is that?
No, that's been.
Yes, yeah, that's exactly right.
Is where Lewis and Bloom uses.
Got
That's
it.
a square block building.
Got it. Thank you.
Towards the tree.
There's a very nice mural back there too, by the way. So, but yes, so it would,
Just to interject real quick. So I think the 4 batteries you're talking about, that we have on site. So they're still in the pending category, I would put it.
okay.
I don't think it changes for purposes of this analysis, but just want to be clear, it's in the pending. It's not BPW property.
Transformers.
Transformers, yeah.
Okay, yep, that's fair.
Is there any noise associated with this?
Right, so we did discuss this when we were developing it. There are transformers right across the street at Schley Avenue, which are actually larger. There is noise. Transformers put out noise, the inverters put out noise. Batteries are pretty quiet, but we have stipulated DPL has their own noise ordinance involved. You should not exceed this number of decibels, under continuous operation. So we've stipulated that in the RFP that has to be met in order for the design to be accepted.
So would it be any noisier than what's there now?
I don't believe so. No, I mean, you've got a much larger MVA rated transformer right across the street too that are in constant operation. And if you're not having complaints there, it's difficult to see that you'd have additional complaints or any.
Oh, can you hear that? Your house?
Those transformers, I'm amazed actually at how low those transformers, the hum is. And we were going to go back and get, depending upon whose transformers we use, whether we use existing ones or others, to get spec sheets on those.
Right. Yeah, I think we have a lot of the test data that was provided with all of those transformers that you have in the pending category.
I would not expect those are any high level.
No, there's nothing too special about them. They're just pretty standard transformers that you might see in an application. So I guess to my point, right across the street is Schley Avenue substation, which is where you've got the very nice spot to interconnect your battery. So that conduit would run underground, wouldn't disrupt traffic or anything. And then if you go to the next slide, there's this is Schley Avenue substation. This empty concrete pad that is kind of in this picture here is where the intended spot of interconnection is. So as you can see, the foundation's already laid. There's this duct that goes up to the interconnection point, and there's actually existing lugs, so you can just walk up and land your cable pretty easily. So there would be some modifications which we have made sure a battery vendor would pay for and that Lewes would own at the end of the project, but there would need to be another circuit breaker just like the one on the right in that spare location, and then there would be some relaying and protection, some computer equipment to be installed and incorporated into your system, but that would all be paid for by the battery vendor themselves when they come through, and the construction be done by them as well. So just flip over to the next slide. So I guess what we're here to talk about is the actual document itself. So we've been working to kind of outline the roles and responsibilities of both the battery vendor and what Lewes BPW would be operating at. We've used this EPP abbreviation in the document, so let's kind of try to tie the two together. When we say battery contractor, we mean EPP. We've also set aside these design requirements that we want them to meet. Sergeant Lundy has a lot of experience putting in batteries at different sites. We've got a lot of people that are on the boards who set the industry standards. So we've spent quite a bit of time making sure that this document specifies what you guys want as far as reliability and safety and construction requirements. So we've outlined those in the 88 pages you've got there, and also industry codes that will need to be followed. Fire protection is always the big one when you talk about batteries. So we've got a lot of subject matter experts that have reviewed this document and made sure you guys are getting at least what the industry currently has as the standard to follow. So I guess if you follow the next slide. So I guess this is the real reason everyone's here is what's in it for Lewes. So I think there's a lot of, ancillary benefits. There's a lot of reliability pluses that we've got here, but I know that Austin and Scott kind of wanted to walk everyone through the actual, dollar amounts you guys, would be benefiting off of this type of project. So I don't know if you want to walk everyone through, Austin.
So you break this into three different categories, really two different categories. You have the rent paid by the contractor, similar to the Alivo contractor. It's a fixed fee. With this RFP, we kind of put what we wanted in there and then put kind of like when I went to the city and asked for a blank check for $43 million, they had to give their best proposal to us. So they would put a number in there for what they feel is if a good rent payment would be to us. On the capacity and the transmission charges, Scott, you can correct me, but that is a benefit to the entire Dmacc as a whole. So we would reap a benefit, a percentage of the overall savings to Dmacc on the capacity and the transmission charges. And then the shared profits in the PJM market, that is whatever they feel they want to, what they feel our percentage would be of those savings, and if they actually want to enter into the PGM market. Am I right, Scott?
That's right.
What percentage, what kind of ranges would we typically benefit? I mean, what would you anticipate?
You come to the back.
Come on, you can't be heard otherwise.
So, scholars with Dmacc, the amounts that you would receive, the amounts that you would receive would be related to certainty. If a rent payment is a certain payment, a capacity and transmission cost is less certain, but is more understood. Generally, there's forward pricing you can base it on. Shared profits in some of the other programs is whatever the market is at that time. If it really goes to your level of risk. If you want a higher guaranteed money, they will slide rule the shared profits, most likely lower. If you want higher potential profits other ways, they may lower the rent payment. In addition to that, the way you get to these reduced capacity and transmission charges is by saying, we want access, Lewes, wants access to this battery during certain times of the year, and saying we want access to call on that battery for 25 times, 4 hours apiece. They're going to figure that into their pricing and say, well, we can offer to show you this much. If you were willing to adjust that ask lower, we might be able to give you more. If you adjust it higher, we would give you less. The purpose being to go after the transmission capacity. You don't know what the days are going to be when those things occur. It's 5 days of the year, 5 hours of the year that define your capacity cost. It's 1 hour of the year, 1 day of the year that defines your transmission. We're trying to see that we can hit it with 25 chances. Dmacc so far, in our ability to call it through our vendor ACES, Power Marketing, is we've been able to hit that for the most part, for the past 7, 8 years that we've been managing the program. So,
and you may want to just, for everyone's benefit, so the typical peak demand is 2 hours. So we chose the 4 hours to make sure that we had adequate timing that we weren't going to miss it by a certain amount. So the sizing of this was all based upon uncertainty also.
correct. You have an hour. It could be an hour from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock. We've had times where load is still growing. It extends to 6 o'clock. If you have a very small battery that's only giving you 1 hour worth of service, that's really unreliable. If you get 2, you're taking chances. The larger you go, the better mitigating risk you have, but you're adding more cost. But there is risk to not having a hedge against your capacity and transmission.
I don't know if you have this now, but the last week or two, the heat index has stayed up way later in the afternoon, in the evening. Mm-hmm. Have you seen demands yet, or is that still not?
we have seen, we can get access to the numbers preliminary. We'd have to wait till PJM certifies them. But we've seen what you said. We've had some streaks where there's 90 degrees and sometimes not each 90 degrees is the same 90 degrees. So we have to do our best to try to gauge what the peak will be.
And to go along with that, there's also as a safety net, obviously you're using to hit your peaks, but if they fail to hit their peaks, there's also language in there that that with the help of Dmacc, we put in to cover us so that if they do not meet that peak and it affects us, they cover those costs through a penalty.
Right, because the access, this is essentially granting them access to the marketplace. They bid their availability into the marketplace. The marketplace says your availability is worth X amount of money. And sometimes the marketplace tests. They do at least one test a year. And if that's all that ever occurs, PJM does not actually call and say, we need to load shift, everyone help us load shift. They don't do that. A one test event is all that's needed, and the vendor would be compensated for their availability. There never be any action, just you qualified during the test, you get access to the money. But that doesn't do anything for you to actually lower your peaks. Those are going to occur on different days than a test. So the idea is if you put in that they need to perform when you request them to perform, and if it turns out you are right on calling a day that it's supposed to occur today at 4 p.m. and their battery is unavailable when it should have been available, that money that they are getting, you get to claw a portion of that back because you are incurring that portion of capacity next year that you didn't compensate for this year. So it's a way to make sure that you're compensated for their inaction.
Okay.
Thanks, Scott. So I guess in addition to that, we have discussed lined up an islanding scheme for feeder one, which is where you guys have your hospital and your primary loads or essential loads. So in the event there was an outage, you lost power coming in on the 69 kV line, you could arrange your circuit in a way that the battery would feed the primary or the essential loads as a backup. The hospital I know has a generator, but this would be another source of power that they could count on. And then this will also help you incorporate more solar and wind onto your system because there's a limit at this particular setup where you don't want to backfeed onto the 69 kV line. So you've got this kind of limit of how much solar you can put onto the system before it would backfeed. But if you can charge the battery with that power, then you can increase the amount that you can incorporate on your system. This is a limit we brought up in our study previously. So if you go to the next slide. To follow up on what the battery contractor would be responsible for. So we did our best to try and make sure that there was very minimal amount of money being put in by Lewes BPW. So they're going to design, build, own, operate, and maintain this best equipment. They will insure it. Lewes BPW will insure the building that is sitting in or being used. And any upgrades, anything that breaks, it's on them. They're going to have to replace that. So there'll be a contract amount of power that they will be held to, and then they're responsible for doing everything that they need to meet that level. They'll also provide training to your staff and to the local fire department to make sure that they're well aware of any special cases you'd have in case there was an incident for the battery. And then as Scott and Nelson just talked about, they would be involved in dispatching the battery to meet these load shed events that you guys would incorporate. And then coordinate as well as respond to emergent maintenance needs.
How dangerous are these? The general public's going to be interested in having something that's going to blow up on them.
Yeah, there's.
So what would you? Can you describe that? What the risks are?
So I guess the the popular catastrophic failure right now is called thermal runaway. So they get hot and then they get hot to a point where you can't cool them down easily. That's kind of why the industry's been kind of updating this fire protection code every year, just because they've been kind of learning as they go along. So it's at a very good place now. So the fire protection requirements that come with the battery containers themselves are redundant and they're very intensive. There's usually some sort of an emergency backup system that involves a deluge, because you just kind of have to douse these things in water once they get to that point. But the control systems on these devices, there's a lot of manufacturers, there's a lot of competition. So there's some competition to make sure that yours is the safe, if not the safest battery kind of on the market. So there's been a lot of developments there. And then our spec as well, we've kind of outlined these very rigorous safety standards that they would have to meet in order to be able to install a battery on your system.
And to that point, the one recent event, well, not recent now, but the Arizona fire has caused a lot of industry introspection, and they are really analyzing the failure modes and the responses. Now, that event was actually triggered or made worse by the lack of training of the local fire departments and the lack of training of the emergency people in the area. So we have required in here, if I remember correctly, training for the local fire departments and emergency and the BPW folks. Because the last thing you want to do is, and what made this worse was they opened the door on a battery that was overheating, and then they allowed oxygen into it. So
That's very
there's operational things that go on that accelerate or amplify the safety. And we're going to have to, one of the reasons for being able to going out for bid is, get from the vendors what they're offering, and hopefully with multiple vendors, it'll make us smarter also.
Absolutely. Sergeant Lindy does have.
Chairman.
Sure. Yeah.
Raise his hand.
Please do.
I don't know if he wants to chime in. He can chime in.
Yeah, this is Jeremy, Senior Program Manager, Sergeant Lundy. I wanted to respond to the question in the room, maybe piggyback a little bit there off of Tom. So the general public, there really isn't a safety risk here, similar to the Chalet Avenue substation across the street. The access will only be available to those with the appropriate permissions and so forth. And the real safety concern is around, the BPW staff or the fire department staff, right? So that was something that was very important to us, to make sure that we were having the battery contractor and their experts really show, the folks that could be entering the facility, how to handle, how to maintain it, and maybe in some cases to the fire department, just let it burn down, right? And don't attempt to put out any fires or save any equipment. So I just wanted to add that for a moment and take a second to introduce myself.
Thank you, Jerry.
Sure. No, absolutely. Yes, kind of to that point, we do have the kind of a lot of fire protection engineers on staff. So we are contracted to do the bid of it. So we will be kind of looking at these bids as they do come in and providing recommendations on what they've presented as their fire protection means, along with the rest of it. Everything that they've presented, we'll review and provide a recommendation to Lewes BPW, who will be the final decision, yes or no, kind of, if we want to do something like this.
This identifies the type of battery you want, or can they choose?
They can implement. We specified 4 hours. We specified this is the space that you have, and we will provide the load data to them so they know what load they need to hit. The rest of it, we're hoping to hear back from them, and then we would choose what is best for Lewes.
Is it a low price bid award? Is that, or is it performance
We have a matrix developed, which you may or may not have seen, but there's point by point, price is part of it, revenue generated is part of it, but there's also a lot of technical data that we'd be ranking them on. This is,
So we don't have to go with the lowest bidder.
we don't have to, no, absolutely not.
And there is a probability that the bids may not be apples to orange.
Sure.
Or may not be apples to apples, and it may require a second round based upon what we learn. Alternatively, it could come out that some bid shows up as being exemplary and that we choose that. But, one of the things we talked about as a team that, there's so much uncertainty and there's so much different technology that each of the vendors has that we wanted them to provide their best package and help educate us.
There's got to be some kind of benchmarking, right, about how much this would generate. And I realize it's a range because there's so many different factors involved in it. But there's got to be some assumptions that you guys have a business model. How much would we be able to make off of this, do you think?
So, I mean, we could tell you how much power you could save, but as far as the financials, that's kind of really like a utility decision. Dmacc, right. So these transmission costs, which is what we're going after, we're not really privy to that information at this point. So I mean, we would see what they could do, how much energy they could shave per hour. This 4 hours, it sounds like it's going to be an optimal for this site. And then you would be able to, they'll tell you how much they can discharge and charge during peak days. And then, Lewes BPW would be able to look at that with Dmacc and say, this is how much money, we could save. We have stipulated they're supposed to identify a dollar amount in their bid, but we can actually, look at that and make sure it's an actual good estimate and not just a number they throw.
I assume the batteries deteriorate. I'm sorry. I assume the batteries deteriorate over time.
Sure. There's degradation. So there's usually going to be an augmentation plan. So either they overbuild the battery at the beginning, but since battery costs are kind of decreasing, typically what everyone does is they build for the megawatt hours they need right now, and then there's a plan for augmenting the battery later with more units to keep the capacity. But again, that would be all EPP funded. Like, it would be their responsibility to maintain a megawatt level for your needs. That wouldn't be costs from the BPW.
The last time we were going to, the number was substantial.
Yeah.
The savings.
That's right. Do you remember what it was?
No, I can't
remember.
I look it up, but then there was a regulatory change that made it less attractive. How does that impact us? Where do we stand?
Scott, do you want to speak on what changed in the PGM market as far as savings? When Aliva was here, I knew there was a higher incentive to participate, and I think Aliva was giving us a large portion of that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Jeremy has his hand up again.
Good. Jeremy, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So I wanted to take my crack at the question in the room about how much dollar-wise savings or earnings does this mean to the BPW? And I think the way I would answer that question would probably more be around what we're here today is to get the authorization to move forward and understand what these battery vendors are going to put forth. The next time we're in front of you, we'll have a better idea of what we saw, right? What's out there. We'll have a matrix there for you, and we'll be able to better clarify that question after we see what they put forward, right? And sort of each step along the way that gets flushed out a little better without any full commitments from the BPW.
I guess my question was really, has it deteriorated so that our original decision would be different?
I think
is it still worth that? And I'm just trying to get a feel for what kind of numbers we're talking about.
I think the only thing that deteriorated was the PGM market side of things and participating with them versus transmission and capacity hasn't changed. So that savings is not going to be any different than what it was then.
And the prior package did not address peak shaving. It was strictly an ancillary market the size of those batteries would have done nothing for us from peaking.
I thought that was a key part of it.
Yes, no, we did have a saving.
I thought that was my understanding.
The way if I can remember, Levo was giving us a very large portion of their savings at the time in regards to the PJM market. It wasn't, they were paying us a hefty rent and in combination with that, because I don't
But
think.
there was peak shaving. As I remember.
Do you remember?
I was not a part of the actual
We
contract.
talked a lot about peak
Yes,
shaving.
and my understanding was that they were mostly participating in the frequency regulation market,
Oh.
which was very lucrative at one time and is now, pricing has gone down, which essentially made the ability to have a contract.
If you go back and look at the labor contract,
Yeah.
the majority of it was the ancillary market. It was a regulation. And then it had an adder for peak shaving. But there was no confirmed number in there, and there was a percentage. But
That was a percentage.
right.
Yeah.
But the size of those batteries, and when you look at what it takes to do peak shaving, that secondary category would have been next to nothing.
Really?
In my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, the batteries were ideal for frequency regulation because unlike a gas turbine, I mean, they're on and off almost instantaneous, which makes them ideal for the frequency regulation market. You can't generally turn a turbine on in 1 second. Right. So.
And the frequency regulation market has bottomed out, so.
So that made that contract not as viable.
Good.
Thank you, Scott.
Interesting structure.
It is.
Just like to
Go ahead.
add, last bullet point, we do have a lot of submittals coming in your way for as part of the RFP, part of the design process, there'll be 36%. You'll see what they're actually intending to install. And SNL has offered owner's engineer services in the past to companies who need engineering oversight and looking at that. So I guess that was just my last bullet point, but thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Excuse me, is this an active market? There are a lot of people in this business that will get a lot of proposals?
Yes.
What did we identify? 4?
That was 4, yes, provided by Austin and Scott, and then we have companies that we've dealt with in the past we're going to include in the bid as well. So.
And this size would be attractive to those?
Yes, it's, there's a lot of, I know 2 other utilities that are installing at least this size going on presently. There are like the big ones you read about, but there's much more common to have a smaller size like this. And then, like I said, the setup you've got where you're right across the street from the substation is pretty appealing to a battery vendor. There's not a lot of long distance.
Offsite stuff.
All I have to do is plug it in, right?
Well, I hope it's that.
You can do the on.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, thank you very much. Very interesting.
Thank you very much.
This is a fun
Getting all
project.
the technical things.
Sergeant Lundy, Dmacc, Austin have been phenomenal at putting this all together.
And Darren.
And Darren Cushing.
I had to throw it in there.
And this has got a lot of detail in it and a lot of thought went into it. And like I said before, it may come to fruition or may make us smarter to go out for a second round.
So we're cover enough to pay for the AMI.
So this is Jeremy from Sergeant Lundy. I want to just mention one maybe food for thought here. So it's not just the investor owns that are out there after these batteries. We're currently supporting Delaware Electric Co-op now. We did a system study for them in terms of impact on their system. They're looking at implementation through ODEC in the next couple of years. Also, Chop Tank Electric is I think a little behind, but they're also looking at battery energy storage. And then far down on the peninsula there, A&N Cooperative is also looking at battery energy storage, right? And a bit of a push, I'll say, from ODEC. So I just wanted to plug that and some other activity that's non-investor owned in the utility market that are also looking at these technologies.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Does the board want to digest this RFP before we give any sort of feedback to SNL about going and actually soliciting bids?
I think we need to do that. I mean, it'll be interesting reading. I don't know how much I'll pull out of it, but I think we made a decision to move with this thing.
I mean, we don't know enough not to say yes.
Yeah, right.
Right. Well, that's a good point. I like that. Yeah.
I mean, we've been working on this for like 8 months now,
Right.
maybe even longer. I mean, I really think, recognizing that we're not necessarily going to have to make an award. This will get us smarter.
And we already approved the Lewes before.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the idea of the battery was approved before. So I agree. I think it's a wonderful idea. But do you want a motion?
No.
We have to get a motion?
It would be great to see a model and how it works. And
Yeah.
Okay.
So can we just say that they go ahead or?
I think it's just a consensus.
Yeah,
to move
okay,
forward
good.
with it.
All right, fine.
We'll set up another call. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Very interesting, both of them. We're into old business. Item 9, open forum, general discussion on the formation of the finance committee.
I've got about a 4-hour presentation.
We can always take about
Do we have a mute button?
In front of you is this document. And the only reason it wasn't in packages is we weren't able to connect because I guess you thought selling your place was more important, which I can understand that completely. The first page is the prior meeting. The second page on the back of that's the prior meeting. What Trent had asked me to do was to put together a charter-like aspect of how to think about this. This has not been vetted through legal. The way I look at this quite clearly is, Jack Lesher was a CPA. I am not a CPA. I had 20 plus years in the financial and in the banking industry, but I am not a CPA. I don't know who comes after me, but I want to be as smart as Jack Lesher. And having a committee of people who have these skill sets allow us to get more information and more knowledge about the decisions that we make. The finance committee in and of itself does not make decisions. They make recommendations. And then we as a board take that information and decide what to do or not to do with it. So as you read through this, there's a lot of different things that I pulled out because I just wanted to have specificity just in case we needed it. But to me, it kind of goes into that DNA comment that I've made several times now. This is DNA that if we have this committee, will make us smarter. And again, I don't know who's going to follow me. Hopefully they're better than me. But if not, still having these kinds of people, I don't say retainer because that's not the way to think about it, but in that finance committee, likewise, the treasurer for the city would be on this as well. We would be co-chairs is how I looked at it and how I've written it here. And when I said that, us here internally, there's a lot to look at. I'm only recommending initially 4 meetings a year, which is what I think the city kind of started out with.
We still are at 4.
At 4, okay. We do reserve the right to have other things but everything has to be approved by the board. This is not an independent, we're doing this thing. This is an independent, here's our thoughts, here's what we think. And candidly, it goes around things that we need to understand anyway with the reserve policy, with different investment opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. It is just an information board for us to pull out and leverage that skill set to the degree that we think is necessary.
I have a question about these meetings not being open to the public.
And I put that down initially.
I don't know how you don't have these open to the public.
And I wasn't sure if.
Our meetings are all open to the public.
I know yours is now, but I didn't know if it was initially. And I didn't know.
That's
the-
always been open. We have the guru here.
Yeah.
I like transparency and openness.
Yeah.
But I want to get it done too. So I'm at the will of the board.
So as Earl said, this has not been vetted through legal yet. yet, so I'll have some comments on this. Just very generally, the general rule of thumb is that any committee conducting public business is subject to FOIA, which requires being open. Now, the oddity here is, and to answer some of these questions, again, I want to do a more thorough review. Any committee would have to be created with specificity via a resolution. So the board would have to outline what that looks like. This is helpful to prepare that resolution. You cannot delegate your authority to the committee. So to the point of it being an information committee, that is fine. The board still has to maintain all of the decisions. I did see here subcommittees. Again, I think it's messy because the board has to, via resolution, create committee, give discrete tasks and areas, and then it's information. Because it is a board committee doing board business, it's FOIA. And I think that would, even if there were a gray area, err on the side.
I'm not looking to get gray in this at all. I want this to be obviously very much in the clear. And I would like it to be open because I think transparency is important. And that's a necessity if we decide to do this.
I would just recommend, sorry, Mayor, real quick, I would recommend if the board wants to go forward, the next step is putting that resolution, and then the board can review the resolution, because that is the vehicle. We may also, and we can talk a little bit more when we get to the bylaws topic, your bylaws don't address committees. Doesn't mean you can't do it, but if we are going to have committees, we should also have a parallel change to the bylaws so that you can see what that structure is.
So the one question I have on the membership of the committee,
Yes.
it says that, 3 to 5 additional, and there was sort of one term concurrent. So that means I'm a little concerned with lack of continuity. And like the city, certain committees are 3-year terms and they're staggered. And I might suggest,
I would like a longer term. I like staggered as well. I think that's a very good add. I didn't pick up on that. I don't know how hard it is to get the resources to do this personally.
I think it'll be very hard.
Okay.
But I do think the staggered term over 2 to 3 years would make sense.
Yeah. Two great adds.
yeah, and whether it's 2 years or 3 years, I would like to see some sort of continuity.
Yep. I think also, Mike will do this in his review, but this is a recommending committee, not an approval committee.
Correct.
So anything that this committee would do would come back to this board.
Yeah, I think that's what Mike said.
Yeah.
Mike said that.
And that is stated in here.
I know, yeah.
Let's turn it over to Mike for his presentation, but I'm all for it. I think it's a great idea, and
It's worked.
well, I should have had it for, we had Jack Lynch.
Yeah, you didn't need it when you had a jack. All right, thank you.
Hope this can be as much fun as Jack was.
That's a high bar. And bar is the right word.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. We're in the new business, open forum general discussion of the Lewes BPW bylaws. Mike?
Thank you, Board President, Lee, members of the board. With the permission of the board, the leeway from the board, I'd loop item 10 and 11 together. I think there's some similarities, at least for purposes of this discussion, 11 being the video conference guidelines. The bylaws themselves actually require that the board review the bylaws every year within 90 days of the election of officers, which happens at the annual meeting. We are within that 90-day period with the back end of that period. So this is the opportunity for the board, if there are questions with the bylaws, if there are requested revisions to the bylaws, this is an opportunity to do that. You are under no obligation to change anything. This is just a built-in process that if the board wanted to look at that. We did just mention the committee. One recommendation I would have is that along with the resolution, we also consider an amendment to the bylaws that acknowledge a committee. I'm happy to draft that if that's the will of the board. But in terms of item 11 on the agenda, that is video conferencing. FOIA was changed at the end of this last legislative session. I will say one of the lessons from COVID is I think folks have realized that there actually is some value and benefit to allowing video conferencing if it is done well and appropriately. Previously, FOIA used to prohibit elected bodies from participating in meetings via video conferencing. You can now do, as an elected body, you can now participate via video conferencing. If you are going to do that, you have to make sure that you comply with the specifics in the state law, which include in the agenda, you need to identify video conferencing capability. You need to have an anchor location with somebody present in that anchor location, and any witnesses or presentation, they need to be visible and they need to be able to be heard. Obviously, the city has a great setup here and it works well in terms of the webcam feature, but if the board wants to offer a video conferencing capability for its meetings as it's doing, we do need to make sure the agenda clearly specifies how members of the public can log on. Members of the board can also participate remotely as long as we have an anchor location and one person is present. That is a change in the law. Because of that, I also think that if it be the will of the board, we modify the bylaws to acknowledge that participation can occur via video conferencing.
That's a good idea.
And just for footnote, the Rollins Center is set up the same way as this facility is. We anticipate that we'll have most of our meetings over there. The planning commission's already having them over there.
We had heard that, and I know that the board also for workshops has the function upstairs as well. So it's the new way of the world, and there are pros and cons for sure. But I think this provides some flexibility, which makes a lot of sense if that's the will of the board.
I think the idea of it is really good because of the flexibility. If you run into a problem sometime, you can use it. Yeah, so that's good.
Yeah, somebody's traveling like Tom did.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, that worked well.
Could we just comment that the executive community on resiliency that we appointed,
Yes.
the majority of those members prefer to come here.
Oh, really?
Because they like the interaction.
Yeah, I do too, but
Yes,
it's not good for.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
just, but
I
a footnote.
Now, could the board just, I guess maybe require that you're here personally if you're in town and available to go? Could that be a condition so we don't have people staying home? Because I think there is benefit to have this interplay like this.
Yeah, I think that you have to put some caveats in there for health reasons or all.
Yeah, I'm saying if they're available.
Mike can put all that together.
And able to do it. I think that would be smart.
Those are extenuating circumstances.
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I think it is too.
And they also attend the session too.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions or suggested, do you have any suggested changes to the bylaws or anything?
No, my only two suggestions are that you do go forward and incorporate a video conferencing language and committees, and I can have that ready for the next board meeting.
On the bylaws, section 3.5, use of email correspondence, the first line there, the use of for non-confidential communication. We occasionally send things out, email and say confidential or something like that. Should we not be doing that? Is that?
I think with the purpose of that is what it really starts with is use of unsecured email. So unsecured email is general email. Okay. If you had to send something that was confidential, so there's attorney-client confidential and there is security confidential. I think the point here is if you're going to send anything, obviously as a utility that is security confidential, that needs to be secured email. But you can use routine unsecured email for other communication.
I mean, if I send something from my house, I mean, it's a locked system, but is that considered secure?
Josh is the.
Technically, anything that's outside of the control of the board, meaning since if I sent an email from a BPW email to a Gmail, Yahoo, etc., that's considered an unsecured email because it's leaving our servers. However, I can tell you that since the emails that are on our servers, if Austin's email me, it remains on our servers, and therefore, based on our security levels that we have control over, we can we're confident that those are secure channels.
And what I'll also add is, and so this is with my firm, there's the different levels of emails. If I can send a secured email, and what that is that even if I'm sending it outside of my firm, you get it as a link, and there are features such as it expires, I know when that is open, and it's a trackable, that's considered, at least for our firm, a secured email. That's what we're talking about.
Those are additional features.
Right.
There may even be passwords that you have to put in.
Right, exactly.
So we're okay doing what we're doing right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Tom, are you in favor of the video conferencing that you allow?
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
Okay, do we have to vote on that?
No, we'll come back with the proposed language, but I have my marching orders.
Did you make changes or suggestions about the existing?
No.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, open for general discussion regarding an update on Donovan Smith Mobile Home Park Water and Sewer Project.
I will be brief on this one. This was mainly a placeholder. As the board knows, the property owner has secured counsel and is working on securing approval from the bank relative to the MOU and the grant, and that remains ongoing. And that is separate from the notice of violation, which we all read about in the paper and know that is ongoing. This placeholder was requested on this agenda. I'll place the same one on the next agenda. In the event that we hear from the bank and the bank has revisions to the MOU, we want to be able to come to the board with that request. So we don't have that as of this meeting, so there's nothing further to discuss, but look for this item as a placeholder going forward.
Who actually owns managing this process? Donovan Smith.
In terms of
in terms of getting to the desired outcome.
Yes.
Who has the lead?
Yes, so it's a great question. The short answer is the property owner. The ball is in the property owner's court. I will say that there is a lot of interest from the BPW, from the city, from the state, from the county, to make this happen. And we are responsive and available and providing the assistance that we can. But at the end of the day, we need the bank to sign off on the framework. And in order to do that, the property owner needs to work with the bank, and that is actively occurring. And so, concurrent with that are the property owner's obligations to address the notice of violation and the requirements in that. And that is ongoing. But as far as the question of who is leading and whose court is the ball in,
I'm just trying to understand. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, trust me.
The way that this is set up is the state has the money, and the state has asked the board to receive the money, manage the project, and then everyone's connected from there. In order for the board to receive the money, for the board to go forward with the project, we need the property owner to sign the MOU, to grant the easements, and to allow us to go forward. The property owner has not been able to do that because the bank has been holding up the stop sign. So the property owner has to get the bank on board to then allow him to sign the agreement, to then allow the board to get the money to put the project forward. That's the framework.
This has only been going on for nearly 5 years.
I fully understand it.
Okay. Charlie?
Yeah, I guess that's my question. Because I'm anxious to get this project started. Charlie O'Donnell, GMB board engineer. It's been going on for a really long time with the owner of the park. I mean, is it the bank that's the holdup, or I feel like they've known the questions for well over a year. I mean, closer to 2.
Can I just say yes?
I guess you don't know,
no, I mean, the
communication with the bank.
The short answer is, again, the property owner has to work with the bank. I do know that the bank is engaged.
Okay.
The master servicer is engaged. They are asking the questions. As far as what the board can do, what the state can do, we're standing by and we're providing the information that we can provide. I think, I will say, it shouldn't come as any surprise to anybody here. Obviously, the board is eager to go forward. The city is eager to go forward, the state, the county, and everybody is doing everything that they can to make it go forward. Right now, we're trying to get through the bureaucracy, and that is the hang up. We are pushing, and I think that, again, you have the concurrent processes with the notice of violation and the bank approval. And they are, as early as today, I got an email.
Okay.
So there is active progress. It has been slow.
Mike has been doing a lot of the stuff they should be doing themselves.
Yeah,
Just on behalf of the BPW to get it moving along.
Yeah, I think the only thing that could be added to that is the NOV has moved it further. It's caught everybody's attention.
Yes.
I don't understand the bank. I mean, it's not an insignificant amount of money from them, and they're liable to lose everything.
There's a lot to it.
Yes, there's a lot to it.
Yeah.
We'll just stop there. Okay.
So let me just ask this little question. If the bank says no, who do they call?
In terms of,
If the bank says, we don't want to make the change, we won't, who do they call?
who is they?
The bank.
Who does the bank call?
Yeah.
And to inform that so the bank, once they have the information and they're asking questions, once they make a decision, they will inform the property owner. This is.
So they inform the property owner. Who does a property owner call?
Well, the property owner is going to have to inform us, the state and the board and.
So I'm just saying, there's not one single person that heads it up. Okay.
Well, but the notice of violation is from the state. So that response would have to go to Dmacc.
Right.
So
Dmacc has got.
Holding the ball?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Is that correct?
So for the notice of violation and so I will say this, there is an update in terms of, and I think Earl, you're kind of getting to the question of next steps, and this is the update of where we are, question of future and evaluations, and my recommendation is I have that as an executive session topic. So we'll get future and those options when we go to executive session. As it stands right now, the update is that we are, the property owner is actively communicating with the bank. The bank is actively communicating with the property owner, and we are waiting to see the progress.
Just as an FYI, we just heard yesterday, it's a priority, #1 priority project for the governor's underserved population. Yeah.
Actually, we've heard that for quite a while.
He came here to sign the bill recently.
Exactly.
Because of that project.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Item 13, open forum general discussion of the potential projects that could be submitted to the state for funding. Austin and Charlie.
This is kind of an extension of Darren's last presentation to the board. Obviously, there's monies out there through the ARPA funding. The state received $926 million. They have no idea how they're going to divvy it up, like I previously mentioned. What we tasked Charlie to do is basically take a culmination of 5-10 years worth of projects, put them all together. And the idea is, we just had the WEAC meeting. Greg had mentioned that he's sending basically everything that he has up to the state to try and receive allocation of X number of funds, X percentage of the funds. So the idea with this is to put all of our projects on one document, have the board look it over. But in theory, we're going to send this up to Dmacc, up to Greg and Sandy, and send it to the governor. Whether we get $10 million, $5 million, it's better than nothing.
Sure.
But this is basically just a placeholder to say, look, we have projects that are coming down the pike. Charlie, do you want to hit on any of them? Or
I don't want to hit on any of the project. We can talk about the projects all you want, but I would just add that oftentimes with the environmental finance group at DNREC, they'll ask you for your whole list of projects that the board and every other utility company in the state is willing to do over a certain period of time, so that they can go back to the federal government and say, hey, here's our backlog of projects, because they want to get more money, that, as much money as they possibly can out of EPA. In this case, which is a little bit different, but I'm thinking it's kind of the same thing. We want to get our list up in front of Greg so that he knows we have a list. And so when this $926 million begins to get divvied out to the various sources, he at least has our list. And I wouldn't expect to get the whole thing, but, like Austin said, perhaps we could get 25% of it or 20% of it or 10. I don't know what it would end up being.
Yeah.
What we found out yesterday is that, I think you said it at the beginning, is that the governor hasn't decided how he's compartmentalizing between water, sewer, and broadband of the $926 million. That's what the $926 million is supposed to be for, which, when you're having your discussion about both the battery and the AMI, I was wondering whether those projects shouldn't be on the list as well, because, you never know. I kind of think they might fit into the category, but we'd have to talk about that. But they're not on the list right now.
So the criteria is that it has to be something that has to be done by a certain date, correct?
I don't know.
That was 26. Wait, that was 26.
Yeah.
But that's,
you could say
that's
that, yeah.
after it's allocated. So you have to basically,
by the 20.
yeah.
You have to allocate it by 24 and spend it by 26.
Yeah, the mayor was exactly right. I'm sorry, I didn't know that.
So is the idea that we would send this up to that committee or person, Greg, or whatever that was?
Greg's the chairperson of the environmental finance group for Dmacc, which, that's a good question, but I'm assuming that he's going to facilitate the funds when it finally filters down to the water and sewer parts.
And how do we help him help us? Right? I mean, do we provide more language around each of these and why it's critical, or tying it to COVID? I mean, what's the way to manage this process in an open, honest, and transparent way?
Yeah.
I
think there's probably a few things that we could do to emphasize each project, but my first reaction would be to get the list in front of him so he has the total number. Each one of these projects has its own environmental, public safety, hydraulic efficiency, benefits. So we could go into those if he wants to.
I think this is mainly just to show the Lewes BPW, along with X number of municipalities in the state, have X amount of monies that we want, or I shouldn't say we want, but we have projects that, we could use funding for that are geared specifically towards water, sewer, and broadband.
Yeah, another example, the headworks improvements, some of that's because of ragging. That's because of COVID and these more wipes going into the system. I mean, to me, that's a great correlation to what the money's for. It's because of the situation we're all in. But I don't know. I don't know the best way to do it.
Yeah.
And I just want to.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I could easily add another column and say, expected benefits of the project. Keep it short and sweet, but I mean, we could easily do that for each one of these projects.
But it's interesting, Phil, what you had said is, if we have it AMI, even though we're planning on financing it, but put the 1.4 million or 1.5 million in here, it would increase the number.
Yeah.
And the battery, even though we're looking at a PPA, we could easily purchase the battery on our own. And I think I have to go back and do the calculations, but I think it's like $8 million to buy the equipment that we're looking for.
Before we go too far down that road, because when you guys were talking about it, I was like, yeah, let's get it on the list. But then I was thinking, when they said yesterday it's water, sewer, and broadband, I wasn't sure that it fell in. I'd have to check with Greg to see, because it does have environmental benefits, right? Obviously, by saving energy and everything, but I don't know if it falls into the water, sewer, broadband categories properly.
Yeah, but if it does, we can put a dollar value on those, even though we're planning on, going out other ways.
Yeah. Has this list been submitted?
No.
The meeting was just yesterday and Greg provided an update and basically said he's been systematically sending whatever he has to the governor to say through, environmental finance, we have these projects that are coming down the line. And the theory is that you have $926 million and we want to put as much money in there so that we get an allocation, we being the municipalities in the state.
But we have pushed this out of our characteristic and control
This is still ours.
to somebody else. Add in.
Not yet. We just had the meeting yesterday. So this is something that, obviously we showed to the board. Okay, sounds good, looks good, send it up as soon as you can.
So is that something we vote on now? I mean, is that?
I don't know if you have to really vote on it. I think you can just do a consensus.
One thing I mentioned to you, I don't see this on the list, but I think we should have an item in there for identifying remaining lead connections. I mean, it's something, most of them are on the services, but we could put an item in there, I think would be,
Well, it's very valuable. Yeah, the upcoming lead and copper rule revisions that'll take effect in 2024 will require the board to know what type of service every single user has. And then if it is lead, begin to develop a plan for replacing them. And by the way, just to put it a bug in your ear, is that it's also going to require not that you just replace the service to the right-of-way line like we normally do, but all the way into the house, which is a lot.
The utility does?
Is our responsibility?
Yes. Or at least it's your responsibility to see that it's done.
Oh.
So like when we did Highland Acres, for instance, which is the only project that we ever did that took it all the way to the house. We actually, the contractor, the main general contractor, Teal, in that case, took it to the right-of-way line. But then the board, as part of that contract, had Harry Caswell do all the services to the houses. So it would be similar to that, where you get a plumber to do the work on the house side. But it would be your responsibility to make sure that that gets done as part of that new rule.
That was included in their financing.
That was, on that project.
So, I mean, they ended up paying for it.
The feedback we got from DNREC, the environmental finances, is that they shuddered a little bit with regard to the liability associated with funding a project where you were doing work on so many different private properties or even just one private property.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Charlie, I noticed you don't have a number in here for Monroe Avenue.
That's because I hadn't had it developed.
Okay.
I want to say for the boards, the main part of their work on that particular project is on Monroe Railroad. The utilities are in pretty good shape. You'll have some catch basin and stormwater piping work probably because we're reconfiguring the road. But I mean, I want to put $1 million on it for the entire.
I think it's $1 million
board. Yeah, so it would move that 42478 up $1 million.
You want to throw lead in there too, Price?
yeah, and I think that should be a higher priority too.
But that's not just identification, but that's actual replacement.
Identify and replace.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That should be pretty high on the.
That's another 42,470,000.
And I think the AMI, put the AMI in. It's,
Well, we can look at whether it's in scope.
Yeah, let me ask Greg whether it would even fit
Yeah,
into
I think you
that.
gotta be careful. It just doesn't look like it's, just throwing everything in the kitchen sink,
Yeah.
And then you lose your credibility about what you're asking for.
The last I had heard, Charlie, the lead and copper rule has not been issued yet. It's still under,
Yeah, it's coming out in 2024 is what
right.
all the,
So there's, because I've seen a lot.
Yeah, it's still got a lot to go.
But I think and again, it's the salesman person in me. So, and I do this was on there, but I'll just use this as a wild example. So sea level rise mitigation of the wastewater treatment plant. That's an environmental issue. That's a safety issue because of the hospital. I mean, I think if we categorize the impact of some of these ideas, and I'm just using that a little facetiously because I know I don't have a lot of support for it. But if we have another category that says, here's the impact, here's what it does, it gives them a different filter. So if we're putting in a pervious surface in the road for cedar, that's environmental. Right. And it's hitting the aquifer. I mean, there's all kinds of things we need to position this thing as. in my personal opinion, and I don't know politics at all, other than, name, project, start and stop.
No, you're spot on really, because when we decide to do a project, when I say we, the board, and we want to do it through SRF funding through Dmacc, we have to submit first a notice of intent, which is a pre-application, then a full application. And in both of those pre and full applications, you have to do exactly what you're talking about. Itemize what the benefits of the project are from environmental, hydraulic, whatever it is that you're talking about. So certainly to get that money and rank higher on their list when Dmacc considers projects, you have to do all that. So it's a good idea.
May I suggest on this list, item 8 and item 11, don't say what they are. It says canal crossing, doesn't say, I think that's.
Yeah, no, I have to add that on there, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and 11 is the same thing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's all water projects.
Do you have a due date on this?
A due date to get to Greg?
Yeah.
No, there is no due date from him or anything. When I hit him with this, it's gonna a little bit come as a surprise to him because there is no formal process right now for trying to procure a piece of that 926 million. But my recommendation is to get it up there sooner than later because I know other municipalities are doing the same thing.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah,
That's why I asked if there was a due date.
I'm certain Wilmington is probably going to go for, a third of it or something.
Oh, Newcastle County.
Yeah.
Is it an accurate statement to say that prevailing wages do not apply to this money?
I think, did I discuss
I know that's
That's what we learned.
Yeah, the other
We
money.
did
was
learn
not,
that
yeah.
about when we just explained where we worked with the.
I didn't know if that was the federal, not the federal level, but it's still at the state level.
That's federal money that came to the state.
Okay, but I didn't know if they were doing prevailing wage for the
I'm not
state.
aware of that.
Yeah, so my point is it may change some of this math with.
What are you saying? It doesn't apply to
It
this?
does not. That's what I've read.
Well, I mean, and actually, we got our money from the state. It was federal money, but it came through the state. Only the municipalities of a certain size, above 50,000, I think, were direct awardees.
But it came without any prevailing wage implications.
Yeah.
So my point is it may change our prioritization on some of this, knowing that this money has the ability not to have that uplift
Let's
factor.
be realistic about this. There isn't enough manpower in the state to do all this. I'm sorry. I mean, I hate to be out, throw cold water on it, but there isn't enough manpower. And Charlie and I've had that conversation.
Yeah. You don't have, I asked you this question before. You don't have enough manpower to handle this.
No.
We're cranked up, ready to go.
We're shovel ready. We're shovel ready. Good luck finding them.
Are you accepting applications?
We are actually, we've got over 100 people working for us and 75 of them are not licensed, but engineers. So I've got a lot to draw on.
Yeah, okay.
And just as a note, just so you know the current climate, there was a water tank job that was going on. There's an 85% increase in steel.
And that was in the last 4 months, he said, and then it's 300% steel plate increase over the last year. So when we do our water tank, we might want to wait a year.
But again, that gets to the question of, we have a lot of great ideas.
Yeah.
And these costs are going up across the board. We need to pare that list down for our great ideas.
Yeah, we
need to manage it.
It's in flux, and we've started to see timber pricing come back down on architectural projects, but some of the other stuff is going up again.
Well, as we had heard at the city, labor prices are not going to come down.
Well, yeah, no,
So, I mean, when you look at what's happened to labor, so some of the material costs may come down, but the labor prices are not going to come down. So.
So you're gonna put a column for impact. I think that's a great idea.
I'm going to add the lead and ID and replacement and the column of benefits. I'll find out about whether the battery and AMI would work or not in terms of Greg's opinion.
I was just gonna say, we'll work on it and then we'll send it up to Greg.
Yeah. Hope to have it maybe up to him by next week or something.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Okay.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Austin. All right. We need a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Did you need to call the public?
Oh, I'm sorry, I should do
Yeah.
that. I'm not doing. Call the public, anybody out there?
They're all there. Few people.
We have 6 people out,
Is anybody?
and there's currently no questions.
Okay. Call the press, is the press out there? All right. Now I'll ask for a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
You need to we need to wait till everybody's off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead and pass these. I'm sending over some pictures so you saw, so everybody sees.
Yeah, this is like a five, it's like a 5-minute break.
First 3 pictures are during the next 2 are at the next morning after.
This down at
That's at the
the.
So the first one the after?
No, that's all before, that's all during.
Okay.
So the first 3 are during. And then the third, the 4th and 5th one are the morning after. And what you're seeing